Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, I just want to reiterate right now that no one in our building is, absolutely no one in our building is panicking, and that we have hit some, we have some adversity right now.
Yeah, I mean, the most compelling sign of a team that is not panicking is, one, a team telling you that they're not panicking. So certainly, I mean, they wouldn't say that if they were panicking, right? Two, a team holding a press conference with the general manager in week 2. That is a team that is stable and just wants reporters to kind of just know what's going on. You know, that's a normal team. Also, a normal team is when they just don't tell members of the defense that their defensive coordinator has resigned, or explained any of the situation involving a defensive coordinator who has not been with the team for at least 10 days and has missed a game, and the head coach has suddenly started calling defensive plays despite not preparing to do that at all in the preseason. That's the sign of a normal, well-adjusted team that has no reason to panic.
Nope. This is, there's no one in this building that is panicking. Absolutely not.
And no one in the building views Justin Fields as a finger pointer.
No, absolutely not. No one views that at all. That hug had pure, we're not getting divorced. Look, kids, we're not getting divorced. That was the only look you could take from that.
Divorce? Where'd you learn a nasty word like that? Go on. Play with your computer.
Yes.
Go do the computer games,
yeah.
Johnny.
Yeah, go have some screen time while your mom and I discuss this legal document in front of us. And with that, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well and having a moment with us to laugh at whatever is going on with the Bears. We have a great show for you tonight. We have some stuff to talk about as far as some new acquisitions. The Vikings were bullied into picking up a lineman. Can't wait to talk about that. And a new running back as well. We have a preview of the Chargers game, which we'll get into in just a little bit, and the mailbag as well. But before we start, again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there for $3.50 a month, or a little less for the year subscription. You too can get access to the new episode from for the bonus stuff that came out. I suppose it came out yesterday. It came out on Tuesday. So check that out. That's it involves like Dusty impersonations, admittedly, but there's all sorts of really good stuff in that.
But there's good content too.
There is good content too in there. I did send it to Dusty, and Dusty approved of said impersonation. So there is that. But there's a lot of things you can learn from that particular bonus episode, including the history of what's happened with your car since the last couple of episodes and all of that. So there's plenty of stuff in there. So check it out over at patreon.com/NorseCode. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well if you would like to do a one-time donation, or you can go over to norsecode.threadless.com and go and pick up a t-shirt, sticker, baby onesie, magnet, shower curtain, whatever it is that you feel needs to, whatever your life needs at this particular moment. They have it over there at norsecode.threadless.com. Special thank you to our new Patreon subscribers for this episode. And this is where specifically one of the new subscribers went out of his way to go, I'm not giving you a pronunciation guide. I want you to suffer. So he's already in mid-season form. So we're going to get the easy stuff out of the way. Mark, thank you. Kevin, thank you. Nathan Santos, thank you so much. Let's try these. Jerry Somaya. Jerry Somaya. Sure. Great. I'm going to try that one. I get paid to announce names. I just want that to be like noted. My season really starts tomorrow for announcing names, so I can't wait to be on a live
these
mic
are just
for that.
preseason pronunciations.
These are preseason. Yeah,
fine.
I'm just getting my reps in. That's all I'm doing right now. I'm getting my reps in. And Matthias Gutierrez. I'm going to say sure. Maybe. That could be it. Thank you guys so much for subscribing over on Patreon and enjoying some of the Discord stuff as well. Today was a fine day for the Discord, one of the best we've ever had. Second only maybe to the day that I did where the Discord funded me doing an audio book of the worst romance novel that's ever been written. And there was a discussion about that at the time in the Discord. I think this one like rivals that as far as conversations that were had today. So the Discord is alive and well, and Glitchy Lauren is a mod now. So I think that was the big thing that came out of it. What a weird life. Denver stuff we are going to formally announce next episode. I know I said that a couple episodes ago, but we're waiting on Dusty. So
I was about to say this is Dusty's fault.
Well, I wasn't going to stand up, but yes. Also, not buying tickets yet for the Denver game. Surprisingly good idea so far, as that both teams stink on ice and the prices keep dropping. So I'm gonna gamble on that for a little while longer. But yeah, Denver announcement, we'll make that shortly. The game is going to be on the 19th. The taping is likely going to be on the 17th. So we will have more information on that shortly. But again, that's what the plan is. Let's get into the show. And before we get into the preview, we have some new acquisitions to talk about. Specifically, the Vikings were bullied into getting Dalton Risner.
Yep, that is the only explanation.
I like how one of the tweets said, "You wanted him, we wanted him, and so he's here." It's like,
it is weird to acknowledge that, right? Like we both can agree that it was weird that the Vikings Twitter account was like, "Hey, Vikings Twitter has been kind of weird about this one," and hey, he's on the team now.
He's not hanging out in an airport lounge. I don't know how long you can stay in those Delta lounges or whatever, but.
Hey, if you're like I don't know what their Sky Club equivalent is, if it is in fact Sky Club. I don't know if I don't know who has Sky, if it's United or American or Delta, but whatever that equivalent is, they're pretty generous. I bet he could chill there for a couple of days.
Well, they do close at night.
Yeah, just tell them you're a Sky Club better.
Oh, but well, again, yes, but they still do close at a certain point over. I recently looked into.
Yeah, I just feel like if you just tell them that hey, you wouldn't want me to call corporate and tell them that you're treating a Sky Club member like this, would you?
Yeah,
I think that would go pretty far.
I mean, yes, but the fact that it's only $600, and if you're a professional athlete or whatever, not that big of a deal overall. Maybe he is a diamond. Maybe he is a diamond medallion member. In which case, you're just kind of allowed to do whatever you want.
Yeah, you could just take a plane for a spin. Actually, that's once you get up to that level, yeah. Yeah,
you personally get to go up to the
yeah, you get
cockpit,
to fly it, and yeah,
get your little wings too. It's great. So yeah. Dalton Risner is a Minnesota Viking to the cheers of most of Viking social media.
Yeah, I found this so interesting. So I think it is probably an upgrade. So I wrote about this, obviously, but it is a really difficult one to try and map out, right? Because I think it's pretty unlikely that he starts, right away. And it sounds like, based off of what he said, that he doesn't think it's super likely either. The Vikings do have a number of injuries along their offensive line, especially depth, right? Because Oli Udoh's injured. Christian Darrisaw's kind of injured. I mean, he didn't play, right? So, but it sounds like he's, ready to practice. But there's a couple of injuries they're dealing with. Chris Reed is not back yet. And so you could say, hey, they signed an offensive lineman partway through the season as they're dealing with injuries. This allows them to shuffle the line around a little bit more. Now, Blake Brandel obviously has experience at tackle. That's what he was last year. Dalton Risner has some experience at tackle. That's what he was in college. So you could say that this does actually provide some level of tackle depth that allows you to move a guy over to tackle and play another guy at guard. So you could say this is a depth move, but it doesn't feel like that, right? First of all, 1 year contract for $4 million. Typically speaking, players on a $4 million contract average, not, total, but average, tend to start. Now, there are some backups, like at least two, that have signed a contract in free agency for about or a little bit over $4 million a year, and they are backups. That exists, but it's not very common. So that would be kind of an interesting thing for the Vikings to do, as they are kind of not like up against the cap, but they don't have a ton of room to play with. They had to restructure a contract to get to 10 from 4. And so they're in a little bit of a weird kind of cap spot. And so it wouldn't have been likely that they signed a guy for $4 million without the intent to play him, because they don't have a ton of room to play with. So there's that eventually it seems like he could. He'd have to become familiar with the offense. Obviously, he's got experience with the offensive line coach, Chris Cooper, who he knew in Denver as the assistant offensive line coach, which would kind of make that transition a little bit faster and easier for him. But yeah, there's that. Plus, there's also the fact that he was available at all. How many starting guards are just available in week 3 of the season? How many starting guards are available in week 3 of the preseason? Like that is a very weird situation, and it would suggest that maybe he wasn't as coveted by teams as we think. Now, he said like 14 or 16 teams or something like that were interested in his services, and he was about to sign until the Vikings called, gave him an offer that he couldn't turn down. And the way he said it made it seem like he couldn't turn it down because it was the Vikings and he wanted to play for the Vikings. But, it could also mean that the Vikings paid him the most, right? And that would suggest that most of the market or most teams didn't really consider him a $4 million player, which does not accord with his performance, at least from an outsider's perspective, in Denver, right? Like, you could take a look at PFF grades, but you could look at some other stuff. Like SIS has their own, Sports Info Solutions has their own, independent of PFF, completely independent of PFF, has their own grading system where they focus a little bit more on the specifics of the outcomes of a play, like a blown block or something like that, which is essentially the same as like pass block win rate or lose rate or something. And factor that in. But they've got, instead of a grade, they have total points, basically how many points he contributed to the team versus a replacement level guy. And Dalton Risner is a little bit above average. Like, so for among starters at guard over the course of the last couple of years. So, there's that. There's the fact that, you take a look at like Brandon Thorne and his discussions on free agents from a couple months ago. And, he didn't think that Dalton Risner was like an amazing guard or anything like that, but I thought he was a starter, right? So there's like a bunch of different sources that tell us that this guy's a starting level guy, and then the NFL is basically telling us, I don't know about that. So I don't know what to make of him. I think that he'll probably start partway through the season. I think it will be to replace Ed Ingram, and I think we're not going to be overjoyed with the results. There's that. And then also, I did think it was odd the way he talked to the Vikings, like in the promotional video about it, like as if he was moving to Minnesota and like on a 1-year contract. That's crazy. Like, so maybe he thinks he'll be here for longer for whatever reason, and maybe he will. I don't know. But like, that would suggest that he and the Vikings had some sort of kind of long term, and this 1 year is just kind of like a placeholder. You would hope, because if he's just saying that is its own set of worries. But yeah, I don't know. This one's kind of a hard one to parse. But at the end of the day, it come down to he's probably not going to play to the expectations that fans have of him, but he will play and he'll probably be fine, which is a pretty big upgrade.
Yeah, the odds of him being one of the 70th, like being the 70th best defensive player while playing on the offensive line are low.
Yeah. It'd
be a nice change of pace is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't think we're asking for too much here.
Yeah, and he's like a pretty mobile guy, so he fits in the scheme pretty well. He's got experience in zone style schemes, based off of the first coach that he played for under Denver, and the most recent coach, Sean Payton, or not Sean Payton, Jerry Rosberg, and also Nathaniel Hackett. So he's got like experience in the system. He's not a great run blocker, but he does all right. He's more capable pass protector based off of what we saw. So, those are all like nice to haves.
Nice to have. Well, someone else that the Vikings acquired here, but for not a lot and potentially nothing, was Cam Akers, running back from the Rams, which I think now there's two running backs that the Rams traded up for and spent a bunch of capital on that once they made it to their squad never finished out the rookie deals. Like Cam Akers is past his physical and is expected to, I suppose, compete at some point with Madison.
Yeah. So I told this guy on Twitter, lawyer_dog 2Gs, Zach McFarland, that I give him a shout out on the podcast because he was the first one to suggest to me that the Vikings go after Cam Akers. So shouts to you, dude. This is the best prize I can give you for doing that. Also, I scrolled up in our conversation history. He gave me a really good recommendation for beard care, heavy duty beard balm by Honest Amish. So check that out. I did check it out, by the way. It's pretty good. So yeah, Cam Akers, not good. Also, kind of a weird one to parse because he and the Rams have had creative differences, I guess. They don't get along at all. And last year he had demanded a trade, did not get the trade by the deadline, continued to play, did not play particularly well. This year, played very little, did not play particularly well. And then the Rams said actively that they were trying to trade him. Like there was like news came out that they were seeking a trade partner and the Rams confirmed it, which is just, that doesn't really like happen, right? Like maybe in like a Trey Lance situation, it might, but for the most part, like that doesn't happen. Like a team will deny that they want to trade a player in order to drive up the price of the player, right? Because it's going to cost more to get it from a team that wants to keep the player than a team that wants to get rid of the player. But they're like, yeah, we got to get this guy out of here for anything, which is what for anything. Like they gave him up for basically nothing, right? So that's kind of weird. His return from his Achilles, he did not look super explosive. He and Dalvin Cook are essentially tied these last 2 years in rush yards over expectation. He doesn't really have as much wiggle as like he was kind of known for coming out of college. And I don't really see it with him, but he's probably better than Alexander Madison, right? I think that, I mean, it's not like they like absolutely made a move to grab a starting running back, right? Like they traded a conditional pick swap, conditional 6th for a conditional 7th, 3 years down the road for this guy. That is, as Luke Braun pointed out, the Ross Blacklock trade, right? Like it is virtually nothing. And so I'm pulling up a scouting report from when he was coming out of college just to get some good like baseline for what he was able to do to get into the league. So I'll let that load first. But that does not suggest to me that he's somebody that is 100% going to start. Myles Gaskin didn't really get any snaps with the Vikings, so we'll see kind of. And the Vikings did not eliminate a running back from the roster. They put Jalen Naylor on IR. That was their corresponding move. So they've got Myles Gaskin, they've got Alexander Madison, they still got Ty Chandler, and now they've got Cam Akers. And I don't know. This is probably not going to move the needle all that much. Let's take a look at his. So he was given a Duke Johnson comparison by Lance Zierlein, a round 2 draft projection, which is not where he went. Compact, rocked up build with power. I love scouting reports with powerful legs. Played behind a subpar run blocking a unit. It was Florida State, right? Yeah, Florida State. So basically, Dalvin. Subpar run blocking and often found his own production. Tough finishers able to shred arm tackles through balance and contact. Wicked open field spin move. Instinctive runner with good feet for run lane development. Multiple cuts and run lane resets without losing momentum. Eye and feet work in unison. Former high school quarterback. Sudden feet to elude sudden traffic. Nose for the end zone once he's in range. Open field vision boosts screen game value. Has grit needed to handle pass blocking duties. Weaknesses, ball security. Hasn't displayed chunk play explosiveness over 3 years. Oh, Jesus. Attracts heavy contact rather than slipping it. Wide scan of the terrain can cause brief delays to see openings. May have been conditioned to look for early escapes due to bad blocking. Productive out of the backfield, but hands aren't that natural. Has trouble adjusting to throws outside. This guy is basically Dalvin, but like the bad parts.
Yeah.
Like Dalvin has all of this except a little bit better vision and much better explosiveness, at least coming out of college. But like he's not a natural hands catcher. He is an asset in the passing game, but he's just not a natural hands catcher. He did have terrible run blocking at Florida State, and that impacted the way that he played, and he bounced outside a little bit too much. He does slip contact as opposed to attracting it, so that's, I guess, a difference. But yeah, if this guy is a cooked version of, a washed version of Dalvin Cook, that's not better. Cool, I guess.
So a lot of people have been saying that they're looking forward to the mid off that Madison and Akers are going to have. Expect him to see in like a week or two, kind of like slowly brought in as running back 2, and then seeing where we're at.
Yeah, I think that we're going to see a couple of snaps here and there. Again, we didn't see Myles Gaskin play as often as I thought we would. But yeah, my expectation is that he's probably running back 2, and we'll see him rotate in a couple of times. Maybe see a little bit of play in week 3, but not a ton. And that'll, like you said, kind of ramp up for the next couple of weeks until he kind of settles into a snap share, if he gets along with the coaches. Now, remember, a lot of people are talking about like, oh, he has familiarity with Wes Phillips and Kevin O'Connell. But like his problems with the Rams started while both of them were on the roster or on the coaching staff. So I guess whatever that was has been resolved, which is good, but also confusing.
A lot of people are pointing to these moves as panic moves, as moves from a GM who is just grasping at straws, trying to do whatever he can to turn it from trying to save an 0-2 season. Do you think that's an accurate way of looking at it, or is there something bigger at play?
No, and I'm really surprised to see that take, because we've seen the Vikings make panic moves. Sam Bradford was a panic move. And honestly, I didn't like it at the time, but it was probably the wrong move because Mahomes was in that draft. But you know what I mean, right? like from a we need to win now perspective, like this is our window. Bradford was better than I thought. That was a panic move. Flying down to Mississippi to get Brett Favre back was a panic move, right? This is a conditional pick 3 years down the road. Like, so I was kind of making fun of the acquisition because it's kind of funny to acquire a bad player. It just is. Like, that's just the truth. But that doesn't make it a bad move. There's upside here, right? There's a good chance that he is better than Alexander Mattison. And if you can upgrade at any position, like seriously, literally, you could upgrade at fullback or punter or long snapper. I don't care. If you could upgrade at any position for a conditional pick swap 3 years down the road, that's a good move, right? So I don't think it's a panic move or a bad move. I just think it's funny when you acquire bad players. So me making fun of that was just, it wasn't really like they shouldn't have done it, right? But like you spent $4 million on a 1-year contract for a guard. That is not a panic move. That's crazy. If they traded for Jonathan Taylor, that'd be a panic move, right? Like if they did basically the Christian McCaffrey trade a year later, right? Like that's a panic move. This is not that. So I don't see that. And tagged onto that is like a lot of criticism in general of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. And I don't think there is a ton of reason to be super impressed by him. So I don't want to run a ton of defense for him. But I also don't think there's a ton of reason to really criticize him. First of all, because like, yeah, we just haven't had that long of a tenure. Okay, yeah, the 2022 draft class, not looking great. First round pick is bad. Second round pick is bad. Other second round pick, beginning to look bad. Dalton Risner might be an example of that. Third round pick, maybe good. I don't know. We'll see. It seems like it's all right. And then you get to like your fourth round, Caleb Evans. That's a good pick. Does he not get credit for a Caleb Evans? I feel like he does, right? Um, and then Ty Chandler, I think he's not doing what the Vikings want. He's not doing what we anticipated, would happen. But I think he's outperforming a fifth round pick typically in that situation. Nick Muse is outperforming a seventh round pick just by being on the roster in year 2. That doesn't happen very often. And yeah, that's a net loss in the draft, but that's one draft. And it's crazy to evaluate a general manager off of one draft. The second draft, right, the 2023 draft, is looking all right, especially if you include undrafted free agents, which I think you should. Like he's the guy that signed Ivan Pace and Andre Carter, 2 undrafted free agents that made the roster, right? Mekhi Blackmon is seeing some time on the field. That's pretty good. Jordan Addison's a good pick, which I think that's pretty relevant to his evaluation. And if he's not a good pick, that's going to be a thing where that's going to take some time to figure out. But right now, it looks like he's a good pick, right? He's like 3rd in the league right now in rookie receiving yards. Like I think that's pretty good. Jaron Hall seems to be all right. I don't know why people think that this is evidence that he's bad. The G.J. Hawkinson trade was pretty good. The Harrison Phillips signing was good. The Za'Darius Smith signing was good. Obviously that didn't work out, but I don't think that's a Kwesi Adofo-Mensah thing, right? I don't love the Jordan Hicks signing, but I don't think it's catastrophic. The Byron Murphy signing so far seems good. It's weird to me that this was, and I'm not saying that most people don't think that these acquisitions are evidence that he is bad, but they use it as a jumping off point to discuss how bad he is. And that's weird to me because the moves are probably good, right? They might signal that the Vikings did not and I do kind of believe it, that the Vikings did not adequately evaluate their roster during training camp and do a very good job of preparing the team for the season. But this team is 2-0 for the reasons that are most attributable to the general manager, and 0-2 for reasons that are not attributable to the general manager, aside from the Ed Ingram fumble, right? It is not Kwesi's fault that Justin Jefferson fumbled, right? It's not Kwesi's fault that Alexander Madison fumbled. It's not Kwesi's fault that Kirk Cousins threw that pick to KJ Osborne. None of those could possibly be his fault. You could say maybe the Antoine Winfield sack, depending on how you evaluate the pass protection in that situation. You could say, obviously, the Ed Ingram fumble a little bit, but that's more of a freak accident sort of thing. And yeah, okay, fine, pin that one on him. But this is a team that you take away 1 or 2 turnovers and they're 2-0. 2-0. And that's a talent perspective thing, right? People are complaining about the Josh Oliver signing because he hasn't had a ton of receptions. Who told you that was the plan? That seems like a you problem, right? That's like complaining that, Garrett Bradbury showed a ton of promise as a tight end when he caught that pass in the playoffs, and we haven't used him like that since then. Yeah, technically we haven't, I guess, but that's not really the idea, right? It's very weird the way people have talked about this. I don't think Kwesi's done anything that suggests that he is a very good general manager, but I don't think he's done anything that suggests he's a very bad one. And a lot of the biggest moves that he's made all seem fine to me. There's this weird tension about the re-signings, but he did get TJ Hawkinson on that deal, right? He did get Danielle Hunter to stick around for at least the year, right? That's good. That's not bad. Maybe you would have wanted a longer contract for Danielle Hunter, and I don't know. But the fact that he didn't extend Justin Jefferson is fine. The team has control over him for this next year, and then also has the leverage of 2 additional franchises. Technically, 3. I mean, an infinite amount, but up to 3 even franchise tag. So that's not a huge issue. So, obviously we haven't seen Marcus Davenport play because of the injuries. That's kind of on him because he was injury prone when he signed him, right? But Ivan Pace is playing pretty well, right? That you got to give him credit for that. So I don't know. It is weird to say, hey, the fact that they acquired a backup running back and basically salary minimum, not vet minimum, but the lowest possible salary you could possibly pay a starting guard. to the roster midway through the season, yeah, that suggests that the Vikings did not evaluate their roster in camp very well. I would agree with that. I don't think that that is a blanket condemnation on Adolfo-Mensah as a general manager, especially because like most of these question marks that we have are like things that we can't really resolve until we get a little bit more time. Like, okay, yeah, the Dean Lowry signing was bad, but what if the Mekhi Blackman pick was good? I don't know yet. Do you? So it's very weird to talk about him like it's over.
Well, we're going to get to our preview of the Chargers game. This is an interview that Arif conducted earlier today with Michael Peterson, and he is the head editor at Bolts from the Blue. So we're going to go to this interview that Arif conducted earlier today.
All right, I'm here with Michael Peterson at Zone Tracks on Twitter, which, by the way, is a great way to remember how zone running works. So it kind of tells you the nature of the guest that we have here. The editor-in-chief, main editor, head editor of Bolts from the Blue, Chargers SB Nation blog.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds about right. And I'm really glad you made that comment about my username, because I think recently I've thought about changing it because I'm like, there's not enough smart people to understand the reference. Like, you know how Charles McDonald from Yahoo Sports has 4 verts, but like everyone knows 4 verts because it's a Madden play, but no one knows like probably what mine means.
Sure. Well, hey, we should seek to expand the number of people who know what that means, right? So, go for it. What does it mean?
So yeah, the zone offense, at least in the zone run scheme, like you don't necessarily point to guys across the line of scrimmage from you as offensive linemen and say like, I have this guy, I have this guy. You have like general ideas, or you have these tracks that you go on. So every play, whether it's inside, outside, wide zone, you take the same steps. And your rules are basically you take the guys that are going to be coming your way, but like defenses react in different ways. So like if you start taking your steps for inside zone, and at first, like before the play, you go, okay, based on how we're lined up, you should have this guy. But if that guy goes away and somebody else comes into your cone per se, then you have that guy. There's just these set of rules. Like, you know how train tracks stay on their tracks no matter what happens. They just go where those tracks go. It's the same thing for offensive linemen in the zone run scheme. You stay on your tracks and you take care of business, the guy in front of you, no matter who that is, which could change. So you do kind of have to be smart about it, but that's essentially the gist of it.
All right, great. We've expanded the circle of people who get the reference. That's great. Cool. Yeah. So we're here to talk about another 0-2 team that's lost a number of close game heartbreakers. Coming out of this, presumably one team, I guess it's not impossible for it not to be the case, but one of these teams will be 0-3, probably on a close game heartbreaker. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about, I think one of the more fascinating teams in the league. The Chargers have been, for me, a team that I have kind of almost perennially picked as a team that I figure are going to make a deep playoff run. They always disappoint me. So in a way, they're my AFC Vikings. And I don't know. I just feel like a lot of kinship with this Chargers team.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's kind of like almost in a sick way how much these teams are alike. Because I want to say last time we spoke on a pod like this was in 2021, and both teams were going through like the middle of a really bad kicking carousel, or they were having really bad kicker issues. And I think that was the first time we called them kindred spirits. And then, of course, we're 2 seasons now ahead, and both teams are 0-2. Both teams have lost really close games. And then 1-score games, by the way. And then they've lost them in like weird, unorthodox ways. And like where like each game they've lost has a stat attached to it that says the Chargers or Vikings are the first team to lose a game via XYZ. Yeah. Like it's been absolutely insane. So it's not just like they're losing, but it's, you're the first ever to do it
to
this
lose
way.
In this crazy exact manner. Yeah, I think the thing that really tipped me off, or not tipped me off, that solidified it, I should say, because I'd already been on this like train of thought, is Younghoe Koo is doing real well. He's doing real well, and I remember, he was not doing so hot with the Chargers. Well, Daniel Carlson was not doing so hot with the Vikings, and now he's doing real well, and it just feels like. Okay, yeah, can't figure out the kicker thing. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, we had Michael Badgley for a little bit, who we thought was the savior of like the kicker position for the Chargers, because not only was he like making the right kicks, he made a 59-yarder against the Bengals, I want to say in 19, which was a franchise record. He was like good and consistent enough where he started trademarking himself, right? He was the Money Badger. Like how? Yeah,
Money Badger, and that was the mistake, I think, right?
Probably, because like how confident do you have to be as a kicker in your like your game and your consistency to really start branching yourself out there to create a brand? And then all of a sudden he just starts missing kicks, and next thing you know, he's on like his third or fourth team since the Chargers cut him. And I think the Chargers have a good one in Cameron Dicker, but I'm like super scared to say that, because they finally, obviously before the season, they traded Dustin Hopkins, who was just fine for the Chargers. He just had a couple injuries and whatnot, which led to Dicker's prominence. But like now that Hopkins is gone, I am fearful that Dicker's going to potentially fall off that cliff. But I mean, to be honest, he hasn't missed a field goal at all, except for one, and it just so happened to be the difference in their 31-30 wild card loss last year. So I mean, like, you can't write that up any more Chargers-esque either.
So good news for you on this front. Mm-hmm. There is no better kicker in the league than whoever's playing the Vikings. And I don't mean that from like a fan, oh my God, I've run the numbers. Mm-hmm. If you evaluate kicks by distance and figure out kind of what the miss percentage is, if you try to figure out what the expected points per kick, whatever it is, you could line up all the kickers. And number one is whoever's kicking against the Vikings, and number two is Justin Tucker. It's the only kicking chart where Justin Tucker is not miles ahead of somebody. It is what the 50-plus make rate against the Vikings. And this is like a home away stuff. It's not just, hey, everybody's kicking at US Bank Stadium, which, you know, it's not the only indoor stadium in the NFL either. So why would that happen? Mm-hmm. Kickers are unusually lucky against the Vikings. This has played out for multiple seasons. One of the writers on the beat, Matthew Collar, this was like 3 years ago, two years ago, he talked to a mathematician at the University of St. Thomas. He's like, how is this possible? This makes no sense. It happens home and away. It's happened in multiple Viking stadiums, right? Because it also happened in the Metrodome. And there's no reason it should be this consistent, whereas Vikings kickers are below average historically. People kicking against the Vikings are Hall of Fame worthy kickers. And the mathematician like goes through all the numbers and he's like, I don't know.
Just it's like, beyond science is what you're saying? It's beyond quantifiable.
Yeah, this guy's a
evidence.
PhD and he's like, you got me. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, someone should go to school for this type of thing is probably what he was thinking.
Yeah, right. Yeah, someone ought to write a paper. But yeah, let's talk about the actual, players and the football players in the field. I do want to talk a little bit about the Chargers, because they're always this team that I'm like, oh my God, there's so much talent. Right now, it feels like the Chargers, they have a lot of receiver talent. There's no question about that. But it also feels like they're not. It feels like there is a disappointment kind of hovering in the background, which is Quentin Johnston, right? So Keenan Allen is playing really well, actually better than I thought given his age. Mike Williams is doing all right. Don't think they're using him the right way, but fine. Joshua Palmer is playing, I think, a little bit better than a lot of people expected. Darius Davis is taking snaps. Quentin Johnston, what's going on?
Yeah, I think a lot of people on the outside who maybe weren't there at training camp this year for the Chargers would have thought that QJ, being a first round pick this year, would have came in and started pushing probably Allen or Williams for snaps. But those who were boots on the ground came away from camp believing that Josh Palmer had a better camp, and that they started telling people once camp broke that, hey, temper your expectations for Quentin Johnston, because the team sees him as maybe more of a, like, project's not the word, but he was not going to come in immediately and make waves in this receiver room because of the two guys at the top that they have. And to be honest, the way he was a little bit inconsistent with his hands, which was a red flag of him coming out of TCU, probably scared the coaching staff a little bit. And he's probably got just some few things to work on to round out his game, being a blocker, just knowing the playbook in and out. And so I'm not surprised whatsoever at QJ's snap count so far through 2 games. In the first game, the Chargers passing game was not at the forefront of their offense. They obviously ran for 234 yards against the Dolphins. So that was kind of what it is. But then against the Titans, I kind of expected a little more of a Herbert bounce back game. He did have over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. And I thought him, Allen, and Mike Williams all looked on the same page. But then here comes Quentin Johnston, and he had 1 catch, I want to say, for 7 yards. And honestly, everything that QJ has run so far mainly has been screens and or just a few yards outside the line of scrimmage. And so it just doesn't seem like they're trusting him to go out there and run the full work of a route tree and the full work of plays. He's not running intermediate routes. He's not going deep, honestly, whatsoever. Josh Palmer, I believe, is out snapping him. And despite them kind of having a similar stat production so far through 2 games, it's interesting, but not totally surprising. This was to be expected. And I think they just believe he needs some more work to be done, which does kind of take you back and go, you sure did pick Quentin Johnston ahead of Jordan Addison, who, remind me, has 2 touchdowns on the year. He has, I think he's like super high up there in yards as well, or at least up there in terms of rookies. And then Zay
third in rookie yardage. Yeah,
that sounds about right. And then Zay Flowers sure came out in the first game, and I think had closer to 10 receptions than maybe not, and was like the go-to guy for Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. And so you're kind of sitting there going, that's interesting. And for what it's worth, during the draft, we kind of like have a guy who knows a guy in the building, and just take it with a grain of salt. But Tom Telesco apparently really liked Quentin Johnston. Chris Beatty, who was Jordan Addison's coach at Pittsburgh, wide receiver coach before he transferred to USC, wanted Addison. And Staley, I believe, was a Zay Flowers guy. And I believe Jackson Smith and Jigba was, like, of course, number 1 for everybody.
Right. Yeah.
But I think during that time, and in the war room, sometimes they do have these things where, like, one person gets their player and then, oh, you got your player for this round. Let's try to get, let him have his player. And I think TT won out in the end. And that's probably a big reason why they ended up getting Quentin Johnston.
That's so interesting. Was there a lot of like dot connecting between like, hey, this guy's the former wide receivers coach for Jordan Addison. They're going to draft him.
Yeah, there was, I would say for sure that played a role into a lot of like mock drafts that had Addison going. Zay Flowers mainly was connected a lot because he just simply has a skill set that has been missing from the Chargers for a long time. And people can talk about all they want about, oh, the Chargers have like a basketball team in their wide receiver room. And I'm like, that's super cool. But like, have you seen the yak production over the last couple of years? Have you seen any player be able to take like a 5-yard slant for an extra 10, 15 yards, or stop on a dime, make a couple guys miss and gain yards after the catch? Now, the thing is, they picked Quentin Johnston to be that guy because I think the advanced stats that I don't have on me, unfortunately, showed that like Quentin Johnston was the best at gaining yards after contact in college football, or at least up there near the top. So the Chargers picked him with the idea that he was going to be this yak player. But like they get, I think, yak in different ways, where Quentin Johnston honestly was like you throw a hitch to him. He just makes one jab step and then the guy misses. And of course, he's like a bigger, stronger receiver. And then his speed kind of helps him break away a little bit. But Zay Flowers is makes one guy miss, makes the next guy miss, makes the third guy miss, and then gains extra yardage that way. And then I just felt like he had a more complete game overall. So they both get the job done. I just think Zay Flowers' ability was more suited for the pro game than Quentin Johnston's way of gaining yak, which might have honestly just been being a bigger, stronger wide receiver than the defensive backs he played mostly in college.
Yeah, I mean, he did play in the Big 12 where they famously have fairly small defensive backs.
And we saw what happened when he played against the Philadelphia Bulldogs or Georgia Eagles or whatever you want to call them these days. But right. Yeah, we saw what happened, and I just, for some reason, that didn't scare them away. I want to trust them in their evaluation process, and I think QJ can be good, but I just don't think it's like the start you want to see for a guy you just picked in the first round, especially in a year where your head coach is kind of on the hot seat, or was on the hot seat before the season started, and that's kind of molten lava at this point after 2 losses.
So while you were talking, I was looking up the yak statistics. So in yards after catch per reception, Quentin Johnston ranked number 2 in the FBS, I think minimum 60 targets. Number 2, or not minimum 60, minimum 80 probably. Second in the FBS in yak per reception, just behind Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky, which I don't know who that is. Doesn't sound like a draftable guy. So in that draft class, certainly. Interestingly, you also mentioned he had an inconsistent hands, one of the highest drop rates among this group of people. Also had one of the highest numbers of contested catch targets in the FBS too. So that kind of complicates that. But certainly, I mean, statistically, that those all have borne out thus far in terms of the way that you've talked about it. Kind of just an interesting situation, right? Because, like let's say, year 2, year 3 turns into a better receiver than all of them. Yeah, it's probably worth it. But for right now, we're at a spot where it's kind of uncomfortable. The Chargers do have the ability to kind of absorb that given the quality that they have at receiver. But also, I mean, this is not a traditionally very healthy receiving room either. Like if something happens, Johnston needs to be ready, right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I really think when you looked at their draft class as a whole, or at least their top few picks, it didn't seem like this was a coaching staff and or front office that was drafting for their life. It just seemed like there were players, better positions, or players more ready to produce at the NFL level than QJ. And then you look at their third round pick in Deion Henley, who I really liked. I think he's a great player. But
Wazoo, right?
Wazoo, yep. Yeah, former wide receiver turned linebacker, so he's very athletic, had a pick in the preseason. He's been hurt the first 2 games. We really haven't seen him, but it sounds like even if he was healthy, that he might have still been behind both Kendricks and Murray, and then potentially one of the other backup guys in Nick Neiman or Amen Egbungbamiga. And so it just seemed like, man, you guys are really betting on this team who didn't stay healthy a year ago to completely ball out and break those habits, and essentially not need these rookies to produce to be a good team in 2023. But look how the season has gone. And like you said, injuries have happened. And I'm going back to the drops real quick. Last year was a really bad season for drops. I don't know if you've looked at the numbers at all, but Keenan Allen, I think, had a career high 7. And then his other guys, Eckler dropped a couple balls really weirdly. It just seems so off for this team to be dropping all these passes from Herbert. But then to pick a guy who's one of his biggest red flags was drops, it just didn't seem like sound science.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I've got, I think that Miami and Buffalo have more drops, but they also have a much deeper depth of target where you expect more drops. But yeah, I mean, the Chargers here, like Joshua Palmer is also up there too in terms of drop rate. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting approach from that Chargers organization. It feels like a bunch of people think that Brandon Staley is on the hot seat. So the idea that they wouldn't be, and of course, the head coach and the front office aren't necessarily tied together, but I think especially in Los Angeles with the Chargers, but you still would think that Staley would try to get some guys with a bit more of an instant impact.
Yeah, and I say, like you said, they're not necessarily tied together, but when you think about Tom Telesco, his resume of 2 playoff appearances in 10 years, would you let this guy hire his 4th head coach? Because it's not a good track record. And I think there's a really good argument about whether he's as good of a drafter as many would think. He's had some guys kind of fall into his lap, and then he's got some pretty big misses in the early rounds, and especially in terms of day 2 and day 3 picks. His second contract percentage is very much not high. And then he's let his own drafted guys go, Kaiser White, Drew Tranquill, after they break out. He doesn't want to pay them. And so it's a little weird if you ask me, but I just think if Staley's gone this year, I don't know how Telesco is okay, or they allow Telesco to hire a 4th head coach.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's like a really interesting. Do you think they need to go if this happens? Do you think they need to go offensive head coach, or you just don't care about that?
I would honestly, I think it was very fair for them to hire a defensive coach who has offensive experience playing football. Yeah. So I thought Staley was fine. I really do like Staley, but the proof is in the pudding. Obviously what we've seen on the field has been really poor lately, and I can't save him for being a good locker room guy. That is not going to save your job at the NFL. Honestly, I think if they do move on from Staley, I probably would lean offensive and just make sure he hires a good defensive staff, because it's worked both ways. And obviously we just got done with one way. I don't see them trying to reproduce that same manner, getting a defensive coach and hoping the offense stays good. I'm not sure. They could go either way, but I wouldn't be surprised if they went back to offense.
Yeah, well, let's talk about one of the areas that has been a traditional problem for the Chargers, primarily because of injury. At the moment, it is just week 3. It's a healthy offensive line. Rashawn Slater is, I mean, when he's played, he's been really, really stunning. I don't know that much about how Zion Johnson looks or is playing. I know that Corey Linsley historically has played fairly well. I'm not a huge Jamari Salyer fan. I talked to another Chargers guy, says he's playing all right at right guard, but man, I never liked him, if I'm going to be completely honest. And then Trey Pipkin seems to be, I never pegged him as a 3rd round pick. I thought he was overdrafted there, despite being a Minnesota guy. But it seems like he's actually playing fairly well and is kind of meeting that draft capital. So what can you tell me about this offensive line, its strengths and weaknesses, whether my perceptions are off here? What's going on?
Yeah, so you started with Rashawn Slater, and that's a good place to start because he's awesome. I think he's absolutely fantastic. He has one of the best pass block rates right now, grades, excuse me, by Pro Football Focus in the NFL. His overall grade is just under 80. It's a 79.3. Pass block's 85.6. But even without, grades and stuff, like you can just watch him play, and the way he handles himself is just so smooth. I mean, this is a guy who didn't play his final year of college football because he was training with Duke Manyweather in Dallas, who coaches, the best of the best. Anyone who wants to be a better offensive lineman goes to him. And some of those guys include Teron Armstead, Lane Johnson, what have you. So after Slater started training with him, so has Trey Pipkins, and then Foster Sorrell, who is, I think the team's, I believe right now he is the swing tackle, has also trained with him this past offseason. And to be honest, last year was probably the first year since being drafted in 2019 that Trey Pipkins looked like an NFL tackle. I thought he looked really, really good. He just looked more on top of what he was doing. And that's a lot to be said for a guy who for the first couple of years was just like, why are we doing this? Like he came from a D2 school in Sioux Falls. How long is it supposed to take him? Like why waste a third round pick on a guy who was going to be this much of a project? Tom Telesco kind of always has those guys. But overall, I think Pipkins is doing finally what he should be doing as like a former third round pick now starting at right tackle. Zion Johnson has been fine. I think people got greedy with their mindset after Rashawn Slater came out as a rookie, was a second team All-Pro, and believed that when they picked Zion Johnson in the first round of last year, that he was going to come in and have like a similar career path immediately. And I just don't think that's the case. I think he is going to be a good tackle. The guy is built very well. He's got tree trunks for arms. I think he's super strong, smart. This is a guy that honestly I can see taking over at center for Corey Linsley when he does eventually retire. I'm not sure when that would be. But this is a guy that, because at the Senior Bowl, his year, Zion would stay after practice and was getting reps at center for coaches that wanted to see it. So I just wouldn't be surprised there. I think he's a very versatile guy. Where he's weakest at right now is he's a better run blocker than he is a pass protector. Now, will that change if he goes to center? I'm not entirely sure. Grades of 67.5 for run block, 52.4 for pass block, so below average there. I would
imagine it improves. The pass protection job at center is a little bit easier if you can get your elbow tucked in after you snap. Like after that, it's usually, and that's the biggest, but like after that, it usually does kind of help you a lot. Like I've talked to like a couple of guys, like Joe Berger, for example. And, he mentioned that pass protection at center tends to be a little bit easier because you get to, it's not like you get to choose, the help that you receive or anything like that, but the demands on you are significantly less and you don't have to get as deep inside the pocket. So, maybe that would be such an interesting career path for Johnson.
Yeah, potentially. So I do like him. I just think that people who thought he was going to come in and be a really good, one of the best up and coming guards might be a little too ahead of him. I think he's going to be fine. I think he needs the experience, and a full year next to Rashawn Slater I think will do wonders for him. He was available last year. He was the only offensive lineman last year to play every single snap for the Chargers offensive line. So, I mean, that's already a pretty big thing for him. Yeah, that's huge. So if he continues this path, I think he'll be just fine. Corey Linsley, as we've said, has still been playing great. He's a better pass blocker than run blocker. He doesn't allow hurries, hits, sacks, anything like that. I mean, that's all you can really ask for. I think him and Herbert have just been a good pairing to start Herbert's career. I think it's phenomenal. As long as he's playing any sort of above average, I think the Chargers should keep him. And then Jamari Sawyer. So I was interested to see that you're not a fan of him per se, just because when it comes to young players, people have like a reserve about them, but don't necessarily come out immediately this early and just be like, I don't like him. So I was going to throw it back to you and say, what about Jamari Sawyer rubs you the wrong way?
I don't think he moves.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is just like, and maybe this is just because of my exposure, being somebody who follows the Vikings more than anyone else. I just like, tackles and guards that have got the ability to move a little bit more, that have a little bit more athleticism. Also, I have been traumatized by David Yankee from Stanford, 5th round pick for the Vikings way long ago. And to me, the thing that really, that should have been a red flag for me that I had noted, but it didn't really give enough weight, was that he was on the ground all the time. And Sawyer at Georgia was on the ground a fair amount for a guy. And mind you, he did end up going like in the 6th round. So his consensus board ranking was much higher than that. So in that sense, the Chargers, got a steal against the consensus. But I was like, I don't really, and maybe I'm overweighting this now because I underweighted it before and it's just too much of a reaction. I just don't like guys who I see on the ground. They're not like, cutting, right? Like there's reasons to be on the ground if you're cutting or pancake, but like just on the ground without trying to be. That balance issue on the offensive and defensive line is just a huge problem. And I didn't really see much from the Chargers when he played where I was like, okay, I get it. He's so strong. He's so strong. So I understand where a lot of this comes from, but like balance and movement, I was a little bit out.
Sure. I think that's very fair. I love my offensive linemen as well. And, I thought Jamari probably should have gone above a 6 just based on pedigree, but I think it's fine where he went. I mean, I don't know if you heard the story, but like when Sawyer was there in the 6th, Staley called Kirby Smart just basically to be like, what's the deal? And Smart just goes, oh no, he's the real deal. Like, I don't really understand it either. And so that's why they picked Sawyer and why they felt comfortable getting him there. That's the TLDR version, but like there's not much else to it. It's just he made the call to figure it out, and Smart just gave him the seal of approval. And there's all the clips of him dominating Aiden Hutchinson, which you just take it for what it is. But there was reason to believe that worse players have gone later or better players have gone later than Sawyer did in the draft. So you always just kind of think of like, this could be it. And they had 2 6th-round picks and 2 7ths that year. So eventually, why not? But yeah, okay, that's great to know. I completely agree and acknowledge that you like more movement, and I think that's I like that as well. I love the zone offense better than I like gap scheme runs, and Sawyer probably is more of a gap guy than zone. And if he was playing zone, we'd probably feel the same way about him. He probably wouldn't be able to move too well. So yeah, this is a strong group, man. I think. I do think it's
physically. I think aside from Corey, physically, this is a really strong group.
Yeah, I mean, literally, right? This is
literally, just in terms of like, just grab some guy and throw him into out of the club, But
I think Pipkins is probably the one who's probably still lacking a bit. He didn't come in super strong. Was more of athletic just in terms of jumping and his agility and stuff like that at the combine, but. I swear to God, Pipkins grew a beard and you were like, oh yeah, okay, now it's time. Because he just had a different look on him. Seriously, when I saw him training with Rashawn this past off season and he had the beard grown out, I was like, now he looks like an NFL offensive lineman. Like it clicked for me. So
there it is. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. Otherwise, I don't think it's one of the strongest. People were saying that it was going to be like a top 10 group. Sure, I think if Slater raises the bar so high, and if Corey Linsley continues to play at the level we've known from him, then Zion, Sawyer, and Pipkins kind of just have to be fine for it to be a top 10 group. But we'll see, man. They had I think a cake matchup on the ground against the Dolphins. Then they had a really tough matchup against the Titans. So I think we're just going to have to wait to really see how good this offensive line is. But I don't think you can tell for sure through 2 games.
Sure. You won't be able to tell through 3 games either. The Vikings are fairly soft up front as a defensive line group.
Shucks.
Oh no. Also, I would be remiss not to mention that the Chargers do carry the meme offensive lineman on the roster, Will Clapp. So
Will Clapp, sure.
Yeah, so that's I have to let everyone know it's due diligence as a journalist.
My favorite thing is I'm on I have a second Twitter just for non-football things, non-professional, not a burner, but it's just everything on it is not football. So I can have some form of social media that's not football curtailed. And I'll tell you what, I find a picture of his roster picture on just random Twitter feeds
all the time. All the time, man. Yeah.
And it makes me so happy because I'm this part of my work found me somewhere else. I think it's hilarious.
The worst part is so I'm in a bunch of different, and just with my main account, it's a mess. I shouldn't have done this, but I'm in a bunch of different Twitters, and there's a lot of it is the queer, whatever poster, they like making jokes and stuff like that. And so the screenshot of Diego Fego from Navy, the linebacker, who I think was on the Patriots for a period of time, which is perfect, shows up all the time. Because they call each other, not going to say it, but it's just good Lord, man, all the time. And it's just seeing football players and their roster pictures show up is just, I don't know. It's kind of beautiful. It just in these out of these I think I saw Divine Diablo once and I was just that's perfect. All right, let's go. Let's talk real. Yeah, right. Let's talk a little bit about tight ends. Donald Parham, I think, has been a Charger basically for like 18 years now.
Seems
I
that
mean,
way,
I know
sure.
he was. Yeah, it feels that way. I mean, he was in the USFL for like that's not what happened, but he's kind of fun. I think he's still like a 6'8" matchstick man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised that I know he's had injury problems, but I'm surprised he's remained as healthy as he has been. Gerald Everett, who is fine in my opinion, and then Stone Smart, who I think he had like a 40-inch vert or something. He was a quarterback for a while, and then he was a wide receiver for a while, and then half the draft analysts put him at tight end, half of them put him at receiver, one of them put him at quarterback. Which, I mean, he got benched at Old Dominion. I don't see that in his future, but he seems like a fun piece to work with. What does this tight end group look like? Is it like marginal? Is it complementary? Is it a big part of the offense? Like, how does this tight end room like work?
I think it is probably a really boring tight end group on the face. If you don't know anything about this group, Gerald Everett is like weirdly one of my favorite players in the NFL, because if you've seen him, the way he fights after the catch for like 2 yards and he brings like 4 people with him, it is so awesome to see. It like gets your blood pumping. You just don't see people fight for yardage and have that much body control and strength to stay up like he does. I think he's fantastic to watch. I don't think he'll ever be a true tight end 1, but as a compliment, man, if you got a true like all-rounded Y, and then you have Everett come in on certain plays and stuff like that, and you just like play to his skill set, I think he's fantastic. He did a great job with Allen and Williams being hurt for a handful of games last year. He finished with career highs in both yards, receptions, and then tied his career high for touchdowns. And oddly enough, if you look at like his Pro Football Reference page or whatever, and you see like year by year stats, he's never not set career highs in receptions and yards his entire career thus far.
It just goes up every time. Wow.
Yeah, it's actually really crazy. So I think he's a great player, but it's just he's not like a blocker, and he's not going to be that guy for you. Donald Parham, I wish he was as good on the field for the Chargers as he was in what was that, Madden 23 last year. Did you see any of this stuff?
Yeah,
he was literally the boogeyman for Madden like Ultimate Team players. You just got like an 87 version of Donald Parham, and he could not drop the ball, and he would catch the ball over every single person. It did not matter. And
yeah,
so
I think 2 years ago Troy Apke was that at safety.
Yeah, they just moved him around everywhere. Sure.
Yeah,
so that was amazing. But on the field, I personally still think the Chargers don't use him enough near the red zone. It just doesn't make any sense. He had the short touchdown catch against the Dolphins, and I was like, yeah, it should be that kind of easy. And then if you saw his first year where he really played, I believe that was 21, 20, one of those, where he had like 10 catches, 3 went for touchdowns, and his 3 touchdowns were like really cool. He had one up the seam over a linebacker because he's just so tall. He had one where he caught a pass in the flat, and he like stuck his foot in the ground, and this linebacker like he olayed him, where the linebacker went flying like when he stopped all his momentum, and then he just like pranced into the end zone. Like, this guy was scoring touchdowns like an all-star tight end. Like, it just looked really, really good. But then that was the year he got hurt at the end of the season in that late game against the Chiefs. And he kind of hasn't been the same since. He's had a little bit of a hamstring injury that he's dealing with. But overall, I think he's too much of a potential weapon and mismatch for the Chargers not to utilize him more. I'd like to see it more, but he's just not as much of a run blocker, which is kind of the case for all the Chargers tight ends. They just can't run block. They're all just kind of like good pass catchers with different skill sets in that manner. Moving on to Trey McKitty. Now, you didn't mention Trey McKitty, I think, when you were kind of referencing the room to begin with, and I'm not surprised, because Trey McKitty unfortunately hasn't done anything to warrant being on, like, this is going to sound really mean, but he has like more penalties than he has like first down catches, or even as much catches as he had in his career. Penalties and drops combined, I think, might push his career catches.
Oh, that's rough.
And
I think he was like the 3rd tight end at Georgia too, or something like that. Which,
yeah,
I mean, given that tight end room, like, that's not, but still, what?
Right. So he started at Florida State, right? And then he finished his career at Georgia. He was never a pass catching tight end, like, at all. At any point in his career, he did not catch a lot of passes. He never looked comfortable in that role. And then when the Chargers picked him with their second of 2 third-round picks in 2021, it was really surprising, because everyone had McKitty as like a late day 3.
The consensus board was like, what is going on
really
over
bad
here?
So they picked like Palmer earlier, and then they picked McKitty. And so afterwards we spoke with Tom Telesco, and he said that they believed Trey McKitty was the last pro-ready tight end still on the board at that time, and that's what they wanted.
In the 2021 draft?
Yes, that was his almost verbatim what he said, because at the time the Chargers were still looking for like an all-around tight end blocker. And so they thought McKitty would be that. And it just like literally he hasn't improved since he was a rookie. It's like really unfortunate. He's good for a penalty more than he is for a reception at any point. It's just been really rough for him. He's a phenomenal guy. It's just like if you're someone who takes PFF grades heavy at all, he's always a bottom 5 player. I do weekly best 5, worst 5 on offense defense every single week throughout the season. He's a mainstay near the bottom. And it's just really unfortunate. So he's been their third tight end, and I think he should be overtaken by Stone Smart, who has been a really good player as by comparison of a tight end 4 on any NFL team. He makes catches. He's athletic. He finds open zones or open holes in the zone. For a tight end 4, he contributes. And so that's why I like the guy a lot. But again, not a run blocker. So that's just kind of the overarching theme of this tight end group. Very athletic, but they can't run block. And so it really, I think, hurts the offense to be well-rounded as much as they would like to be.
It's so interesting that you said that they thought he was like the last NFL ready tight end on the board, because I mean, so Noah Gray goes in the 5th round. I mean, he's already doing all right. And it's not as if the tight ends drafted after him did like remarkably well. I think people are excited about Kylan Granson. But you know, whatever, Brevin Jordan saw some time really quickly with the Texans. But what's interesting to me is that there was like a pair of receivers that a lot of people consider tight ends. Mike Strawn from Charleston and Ben Skoranek, who is killing it for the Rams. So I don't know. I just find that really curious because I did not see him as that.
Well, yeah, I mean, what'd they do? I mean, he's 6'4", 250 plus. Like, sure, like statistically, he's built like an NFL tight end, but he did not test well. And it's not like he had the receiving chops where you were like, okay, well, while he develops as a blocker, he can be a good receiver for us. Like, there wasn't any of those arguments. Oh, well, he can develop this way because he's pretty good at this. Like, there wasn't anything like that. And I remember I actually went on the Chargers podcast with Chris Hayre to kind of talk about it. And I said, well, you know, they needed to fix the offensive line because that was the offseason where I think they got Matt Filer and Lindsley and we're kind of fixing it up before Staley's first year. And I was like, well, you know, if they really felt like this was the right thing to do, the tight end can be like a 6th-man extension of the offensive line. So if they really felt like this was needed, then I get it. But I mean, at this point, like, hindsight bias is 2020, but
right, yeah.
We're confirming our priors regardless. He is exactly who we all kind of thought he would be, and it's unfortunate, but here we are.
All right, I'm going to skip quarterback. We'll go back to it in a second. Let's talk really quickly about running back. Practice report while we're recording, so that Austin Eckler was not practicing today. So he's out there, I guess. He's present, but he's not practicing. So good to know that he still occupies space and has mass. That's good news. But you've got Joshua Kelly, you've got Elijah Dotson, you've got Isaiah Spiller. What does that? So obviously the running game was really phenomenal against Miami. Again, up against probably a pretty soft front with the Vikings. Mm-hmm. What does that running back room provide that allows them to be productive within this particular system?
Yeah, I think the best thing Kellen Moore did, the biggest thing we've seen so far coming over from Dallas, is that he simplified the run game. And he's made it much more north and south, where he's allowing the linemen to be more simple, get down the field, and then his running backs are more one cut north and south, get down, hit the hole, and it'll all kind of take care of itself. And that's what we saw in the preseason when they rushed for over 600 yards total. It was like the most rushing yards in a preseason since at least 2010 or something around that line. It was a while, and for them to start the season at 234 yards on the ground behind Eckler and Kelly, both running for what was it, 117 and 91 respectively. It looked really, really good. But again, that was a Dolphins defense that really struggled in that area. But Josh Kelly looked for the first time last year as like a good back worthy of like a backup spot. He'd been very inefficient since he was a rookie. 4.45 guy, 212, 5'11, like built fine. Just wasn't an agility guy. He's got to hit the hole hard and churn out those tough yards. And he's kind of been that guy since last year. So that's really good to see. The problem here is Eckler's now out, right? And Kelly's their lead back. And I think Kelly's fine enough, but he's not the make something out of nothing back. He's going to have his holes. He's going to have to be smart about it. And the offensive lineman is going to have to play, or the offensive line is going to have to play a strong game as well. Because behind him, you've got Isaiah Spiller, who was a 4th-round pick last year. And you've got rookie UDFA Elijah Dotson from Northern Colorado, who honestly we all love just because of the show he put on during the preseason. But he's a little more versatile. He showed, he's the willingness to try to make something out of nothing, even call it the preseason, whatever you want. But you don't see every back in the preseason, scoring 2 touchdowns of 40-plus yards in the same game and stuff like that. And he also offers versatility as a kick returner, punt returner behind Darius Davis. So we like him a lot. The one squeaky wheel, though, I'll go back to is to Spiller, because I don't know how much you watched him or paid attention during the 2022 draft cycle, but he was like a top 4 back, just behind the top 3, I want to say, Breece Hall, Devin A-Chain, and I think there was one other person. And then Isaiah Spiller was still kind of up there, but just on a tier below. And
and that's kind of how I think the board played it out. Mm-hmm. What was interesting is that whenever anyone talked about Isaiah Spiller, everyone is very careful to say he's not related to CJ Spiller. It's just a different. It's okay, yeah, I'm good, because that was my question. But can you stop reminding me?
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, I wish he was related to CJ Spiller because maybe he would have a little bit of that physical makeup. But Spiller's a little odd, man. I mean, he was a 2-time 1,000-yard rusher in the SEC. I remember watching him in high school because he used to train with a guy named the Footwork King, where
that guy. Okay,
Melvin Gordon trained with him during an offseason when he was still with the Chargers. And that's where I first saw Spiller, and I was like, dang, he's going to be a good back. I saw he was going to Texas A&M, blah, blah, blah. And then when he started getting in draft hype, I was like, oh, it's him. Cool.
It's him. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, here comes the draft cycle, and then comes the pro day, and he has a really bad pro day. I think he ran a 4.65. I think he was around 210, between 210, 215, 6 foot, and just had overall really bad numbers that don't translate well to the NFL all that often.
These are awful numbers. Oh my
gosh. Just from on the face, Spiller is a nice, quiet kid. But you could see that he had a little bit of a baby face, and you could almost think that his body hadn't even matured yet. He hadn't even grown into himself. It was really odd. You look at all these NFL running backs, and they're all rocked up. You can see veins in their biceps. You can see their muscles have muscles and stuff like that. And Spiller is just not that person. You watch some of the photos of him coming into practice, and you don't really get that same vibe, but this was still a productive back in the SEC. So you believe him, and you want the best for him. But through 2 games, he has been outsnapped by Elijah Dotson. And this is, again, an FCS undrafted player all of a sudden outsnapping your 4th-round pick from less than 2 years ago. That's not a good sign. We're looking for the best. Spiller had that 71-yard touchdown in the preseason, but it was called back due to a hold. So we've seen him do some things. It's just none of that has materialized so far.
All right. That kind of sucks. It's a little bit too much to go into look at every back who's been drafted after a guy, because running backs are so random, and I don't think anyone expected Tyler Algier, for example, to outproduce Isaiah Spiller, or Jerome Ford to be on track to outproduce him, or Isaiah Pacheco to outproduce him. It's probably unfair. But yeah, it is always kind of interesting to take a look at these mid-round backs and see kind of, oh my God, that guy is an every down starter, and oh, that guy's out of the league. It's just very difficult to predict how these backs do. Let's take a quick look at quarterback. And the reason I put it at the end of the offensive discussion is A, that makes the most sense. But B, I also wanted to talk about syncing Justin Herbert with Kellen Moore's offense, because right now Mike McCarthy's offense in Dallas is doing real well. Not a lot of people liked Kellen Moore's offense the last year or two, but before that, everyone was talking about him, doing so much for Dallas, potentially being, a head coach in waiting. He, I think, declined in an interview, and so everyone's like, oh, he's got the world ahead of him, and then the offense kind of tanked. Now we're seeing, I don't know what we're seeing, right? Because game 1, we didn't see any pushing the ball down the field at all. It was a very run-centric game. And then when you did pass the ball, it was horizontal, and it felt kind of Lombardi-ish. And then game 2, pushing the ball down the field all the time. So what are we seeing?
With this offense, the differences between the two have got to be the ability that they're going to push the ball down the field. I think that's the biggest reason why Kellen Moore was brought in, aside from trying to fix this run game. You just have too much of a howitzer on the side of Justin Herbert's body to not just throw the ball down the field. I mean, it was just kind of egregious the last couple of years. I mean, he did throw for 5,000 yards though in that 21 season, but that was kind of because the defense was so bad that he had to, for them to have like any chance to win any game that year. But then last year, I think it was Benjamin Salak who put it so beautifully when he tried to talk about Joe Lombardi's offense, which is that every other offense, when everything goes perfectly, you get a long touchdown, a big play, what have you. But with Joe Lombardi's offense, when everything goes perfect, you get like a gain of 9 yards. And it was one of those things. Yeah, sure. Like he said it and I went, oh gosh, that's just so perfect. Like, of course, Ben finds a way to describe it perfectly and make it all click and et cetera, because he's so great. But yeah, so that was the biggest difference. And I mean, like if you were any sort of a somewhat of a Madden video game player, you're just looking at this offense going, oh, that's stick slant. Oh, that's stick angle. Oh, that's stick close. Like he just ran every form of stick imaginable. So every time they like would try to march down the field, you just saw the same plays, and he wanted to get 5-6 yards at a time. And granted, like he tried to use the pass game as an extension of the run game. The run game was not doing very well. So if he could run like a short hook and gain 6 yards or come back for 8, they probably saw that as, a big run. And while that may be easier to pass for 9 than rush for 9, like you're still only getting that. So imagine you take, a chunk of run percentage snaps and you turn them into pass plays that only gain those similar yards to explosive runs. And then your passing game is still not going to be that great. Like his average depth of target was 32nd? I believe it was the lowest in the NFL.
It was real low.
Right. And so he just felt like he neutered, best in class show dog. And for whatever reason, and expected like that to just continue to work. And it simply wasn't. Yeah, there were issues with the offensive line. We'll never say that, we'll never not put an asterisk next to that because of injuries or whatever else. But it just seemed like there could have been so much more. And it was really inconsistent as to when the offense like clicked and you saw it, as to when it really didn't. And I think that whiplash you had at times in some of the most important games, most competitive games, and you're like, wow, we're really sticking with the Chiefs or we're sticking with the Niners. And then here came the third quarter. I believe it took them till week 8 to score a touchdown in the third quarter. It was some really long streak. And it was almost like clockwork, essentially, is what I'm saying, that they would hit a point in the game and the offense just stopped. And it's honestly not unlike what's happening right now. It's just that they're scoring more points before they get to the fourth quarter at this point. I went back in the last 4 games, which have all been losses dating back to week 18 of last year. I've charted the results of the last 4 drives of each game, and it's pretty striking. Some things off the top is that the Chargers have scored 2 touchdowns while their opponents have scored 6 touchdowns in that time. The Chargers have gone 3 and out 6 times in those 16 drives charted, while their opponents have done it twice. They've punted 2 other times, so 1 out of every 2 drives in the fourth quarter of their past 4 games is just simply a punt, no points for them. And then each side has kicked 3 field goals. So like if you just like put those numbers together, they've scored 25 points in the fourth quarter of their last 4 games, and opponents have scored 51 plus, depending if there's a 2-point conversion here or there. So it's like really striking. This offense really does just fall flat at the most important time, no matter how well they've done prior to that point.
All right. So how do you think that Herbert has taken this, I don't know if freedom is the right word, but kind of license to push the ball down the field and everything else that comes attendant with this offense? How do you think he's taken what has been kind of crafted around him and, deployed it? Because I know that a lot of Vikings fans, and just in general, a lot, like this is going to be an aside. If you take a look at like people like Derek Clausen or Stephen Ruiz, or you take a look at the quarterback rankings produced by executives as determined by like Jeremy Fowler at ESPN or Mike Sando at The Athletic, Justin Herbert ranks super high. He's in the top 7 pretty regularly, very often in the top 5 of quarterbacks. And then, and whenever these rankings come out, people complain specifically about Herbert. And it's not just the Emmanuel Acho, social media, whatever. I don't care about that. But it's like people will constantly talk like he doesn't generate wins. He doesn't generate a ton of yards per attempt or whatever. His efficiency isn't up there with some of these other quarterbacks. How can you say that Justin Herbert is better than Jalen Hurts? How can you say that Justin Herbert is better than Lamar Jackson? Which, I mean, I guess personally I'd prefer Lamar, but you get the idea is that he's consistently ranked as like a 5, 6, whatever quarterback. And that is where people who tend to get most of the rankings from positioning themselves as quarterback experts versus kind of the public perception, which is he's somewhere around 12. So I guess answer my question with reference to that weird fact. Don't have to worry about the acceleration all that much of the signing bonus, which is the reason that trades often incur a greater cap hit than actually having that player. But his guaranteed money is basically up, aside from some prorated signing bonus stuff. So that's okay. And he's 28. He's in the middle of what you'd consider his prime. You and I agree that he's not doing the thing, right? Like in the way that we kind of expected. But I think he goes for a first pretty easily, especially to a team that needs pass rush or has had a pass rusher get injured or something like that in the middle of a playoff run. Like it just feels like, I don't know, the Bills are just like, hey, another one of our pass rushers got hurt again. Let's, something like that. So, man, that would be so interesting. Keenan Allen, I could see, it just feels like that. Obviously most trades are short-term rentals, but man, like I guess if you're maybe the Panthers, right? Like the receiver group is just not getting it done. But like part of the reason they're not getting it done is because none of them are fast enough to separate. And Keenan is a great separator, but that's not where it comes from. So that's so interesting. I know they just need guys to get open, so maybe they just screw it and just get them. But like, man, that's a weird roster to try and figure out who to sell.
I mean, it's the most expensive defense, is it not? That's what I kept hearing. I haven't looked at the numbers, but that's been the thing. It's the most expensive defense in the NFL, and they are as bad as they are.
Let's see, position allocation. I'm over at,
because I believe that was what Colin Cowherd recently did. He put up the stats of like they're 32nd in pass defense, 32nd in points allowed, or something, and then his whole thing was like, this is the most expensive defense, and they're still.
It is, but in terms of, I think this is by cap hit. They've got $5 million more than second place, which is the Steelers, who I also do not believe are getting their money's worth out of that kind of investment. But I get it. You got Highsmith and Watt, and
I think Williams, Allen, Bosa, and Mack. I think their cap hits next year on the books right now say like $30+ million each.
Whew, all right.
Like it's real. Right now, I think they're all over $20 million per year average contracts, and next year is like, oh, there's no way this 4 are still on the team somehow without some crazy restructuring.
All right. So with your boundless optimism in hand, okay,
that's a word.
Yeah, like can we? Let's predict the game a little bit. So,
okay.
I've not looked at the over under. I expect it's 50, right? It's got to be high, right? These teams are just scoring points. They don't have
52
defenses.
or 4 last time I checked.
A 54 would be wild. Okay, now I gotta check.
Yeah, so I mean, ours is from DraftKings.
Sure. I'll take a look at FanDuel because technically they sponsor another podcast I'm on, so I might as well do them a solid and drop the name. 53.5. Oh my god.
So DraftKings is 54 with Vikings 1-point favorites.
Wow. Yeah, this one has Vikings 1.5. So, hey, anybody who knows how to do arbitrage, if that's enough for you to try and get some, I don't know, arbitrage with like a push as your, I don't know. But if someone knows how to bet the middle, there you go. DraftKings and FanDuel here at the Vikings spread and the Vikings Chargers over under. So there you go. Okay, so high over under. A lot of overs hit last week. A lot of points were scored. The Chargers are part of the reason why. On both sides of the ball, I guess. Man, I see this because the Vikings, obviously you can't like get rid of turnovers as a matter of fact in terms of assessing a team, they happened. But in terms of predicting future performance, eliminating turnovers helps you more than it hurts you. And the Vikings are like in the second tier of teams in offensive and defensive combined efficiency as soon as you eliminate turnovers. Now, the Chargers, from my understanding, don't have any turnovers or something?
Not a single turnover.
So that's who you are, right? Like it's the efficiency that you've produced is kind of what you are. It feels like to me that's a Vikings game. It feels like the Vikings win. Obviously, they cannot win by more than 7. We cannot violate the laws of the universe here, but I would say it's probably a 4-point win for the Vikings.
Yeah, I'd say so, between 2 and 4. And to be honest, it would be so funny if the themes continued where Vikings win, they turn the ball over twice, the Chargers turn over the ball 0 times, but yet the Vikings have it. They like score a touchdown at the end, and then the Chargers have the ball at the end, and then can't do anything with it. Like just put all the
just put it all together. Yeah. Oh my gosh, especially if it like finishes with like a sack or something like that at the final moments, take them right out of field goal range. Just perfect stuff, I think.
Well, I mean, how par would it be if they just go 3 and out? It's just like Chargers get the ball again, 3rd time in a row, and then they go 3 and out for the 3rd time this season. Why not? Just call the shot.
All right, man. Just call the shot.
Ooh, injury report just dropped for the Chargers if you want me to throw that in here.
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right, so your Thursday injury report for the Chargers and how it might differ. Ooh, Joey Bosa was a non-participant after being limited yesterday with a hamstring injury.
Boy, okay.
Eckler still done. Deion Henley moves from limited to full, meaning he was probably going to make his debut in the NFL this week. Christopher Hinton, a way backup defensive tackle, was a non-participant with a back injury. Eric Kendricks still DNP. Khalil Mack came back from a Veterans Day of rest. He was full. Chris Rumpf went from limited to full. He missed the first 2 weeks he's our 4th edge rusher. He's back. And then Mike Williams was once again full with an ankle injury. So biggest notable thing there is Bosa not practicing, although he didn't practice 2 days of the 3 leading up to, actually none of the 3 practices leading up to Titans, despite still playing on a snap count. And then Deion Henley looks like he's going to make his debut. Other than that, everything is on par.
All right, so a couple of super athletes at linebacker available for the Chargers. Also, this doesn't change your prediction, I assume.
No.
All right. Hey, man, where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter or X. Can we have a podcast where we talk about that? That's whatever. You can find me on X. At Zone Tracks, that's spelled ZONETRACKS. You can find my work at boltsfromtheblue.com. That is Los Angeles Chargers community blog of SB Nation. That is the main 2 places. I work remotely in Minnesota as a Chargers virtual remote beat writer. I still don't know exactly what my job. I cover the Chargers, but that just sounds dumb. And then because I'm in Minnesota, this will be my first time in the press box. So that's really cool. Can't wait to experience that. And so if you want, boots on the ground coverage, no matter which side you are on, you can follow me on Twitter and then on the website as well, where I'll put all of my stuff.
All right, man. Sounds good. Thanks so much for coming on.
All right, let's go to the mailbag. And the first question is from Draw Play Dave, who asks, what would be the funniest thing the Bears could be covering up right now?
This is a really good question because the rumors are not very funny at all. So for anybody who's unfamiliar, the Chicago Bears, was it Wednesday morning? I want to say, do we have a whole day? It's all times blending together.
Wednesday morning, things got weird with the presser, and it just kept getting weirder because the head coach wasn't even saying that, yes, we have a defensive coordinator.
Yeah. So some reporters show up, as you do, right? As is their job, to the facility. They note that Alan Williams is not there and has not been there since like Monday of the previous week, if not longer, right? And notably, Alan Williams was absent from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game when they played them, and Matt Eberflus, the head coach, called the defensive plays, which is a surprise, but they'd said that he was not going to be on the plane to Tampa because he was going to miss the trip for personal reasons. And when reporters followed up on what those personal reasons might be, my understanding is, and I did not hear this firsthand, so let me be clear, that I don't have like 100% facts as I'm talking about this, but my understanding is that the Bears suggested to reporters that the personal issues may potentially be related to medical issues. I don't know. But that's what it seemed like. So he didn't make the trip to Tampa Bay. So he's still not in the building. He has not been in the building. He's not showed up to the building. By Wednesday, Brad Biggs, a Chicago Bears reporter, I believe for the Sun-Times, let me get that right. He said that for the past couple of days, our understanding is, and I don't know if he's deleted this tweet since then, Chicago Tribune, not Sun Tribune. That is a competing newspaper. I don't want to get that wrong. He has said that the understanding was that Alan Williams' absence was not actually related to a medical issue. Let's see if he may have deleted that tweet, but that is a super interesting thing to say, right?
Because there were a lot of terrible rumors swirling around it, to the point where eventually even Ian Rappaport had to say the Bears facility was not raided by the police, because that was one of the rumors that were going around.
Right. And so one of the reporter for a Chicago sports radio station, like a talk radio station, had mentioned that the Bears facility had been raided, that Alan Williams' house had been raided, and that the FBI, including Peanut Williams, who is, by the way, a FBI agent or
Peanut
has been training
Tillman,
to be. Yeah. Wait, did I say it wrong?
You said Williams, yeah, but it's.
Oh yeah. Peanut Tillman. Has either been training or is just a full-fledged FBI agent, broke the news to Matt Eberflus. So that did not happen, I believe, according to Ian Rappaport, but according to multiple people, did not happen. Hallis Hall was not raided. We don't know whether or not Alan Williams' house was raided by the FBI. And so this is one of the things that makes specifically literally the year 2023, but not 2022, 2021, 2020, etc. The current environment on sports Twitter revolving around these aggregator accounts is that they are a lot less inclined to determine the veracity of reports. So if someone says that they have a source that says something, they don't think, hey, have I heard this guy report on anything before? They just say, hey, according to this guy, this thing happened. And it's oh, you're just saying it now. And a bunch of people follow these aggregator accounts and they believe it. The aggregator accounts are very slow to delete stuff when things get corrected and so on. One of the problems is that they, aggregated this bit of news that every place had been raided. And they even tweeted out a Photoshop of a bunch of FBI agents at Hallis Hall, which, the caption was, the Raiders have sacked the Bears or something like that. It was very funny. But it was just this weird, you're a news account ostensibly, and you're tweeting out this weird jokey Photoshop of a bunch of FBI agents at Hallis Hall. And, most of the details of that report turned out to be denied by the Bears, and from what we understand to be not true. Now, obviously an organization can deny something and it turns out to be true, but for now, if the Bears said that Hallis Hall wasn't raided, very likely it wasn't. Now, there's a couple of important caveats to that, but for now, let's keep it there. And also, that Peanut Tillman did not break the news to Matt Eberflus and all that, a bunch of stuff, right? And so the community notes on that tweet said, it is not the case that, it's X, Y, and Z. So eventually they delete that tweet and they put out another tweet about Alan Williams' house getting raided and him resigning, right? Now, there's a community note on that tweet that says Alan Williams' house has not been raided. And there are 4 sources on I don't know if that community note has been removed. This was as it was mid-Wednesday. And there are 4 sources, and I clicked on every one of the sources, and not a single one of those sources said that Alan Williams' house was not raided by the FBI. All it said was that Hallis Hall was not raided by the FBI. Now, mind you, the reporter who said that Hallis Hall was raided was also the one that said Alan Williams' house was raided. So that guy's credibility is certainly in question, and it is perfectly reasonable to believe that's not the case. But while it is irresponsible to report probably that his house was raided based off of this new information that every other element of this report was wrong, it is also irresponsible to state definitively it wasn't, right? Because we don't have that. The Bears denied a lot of elements of this. Alan Williams denied some elements of this, but they did not deny that. No one denied that specific allegation. Allegation is kind of the wrong word, but potential fact, right? And these details matter in the world of reporting. It is very weird to say that a thing definitely happened when you don't know. So that's all happened, and then midway through the day, it's reported that Alan Williams resigns. He resigns not by sending a statement to reporters, but by printing out a statement, taking a picture of that printed out statement, and then sending the picture to reporters, which is very weird. And my understanding is we don't actually know that Alan Williams is the one that sent that. Like, obviously his name is on it, right? And so presumably he wrote it. But we've not heard from him outside of this photo of a statement. Now, the statement has a wet spot on it, and I believe that's a tear, and I believe that's the only reason that it was printed out, so that he could cry on it to suggest that this is a very, heart-rending decision.
And what an odd, the whole thing was bizarre, and resigning for health and family, but does want to coach again. It was the whole thing was,
and it's so weird. And the problem is, and I'm not going to repeat what the rumors are. If you know what they are, you know what they are. If you don't know what they are, pretty easy to find. But important, the reason I'm not repeating them is because I don't know. And so if you find them, understand that no one has capital R reported it, okay? These are extraordinarily serious allegations. I'm not going to repeat them. But whatever they are very serious, extremely serious, and mind-boggling. Which is why it would make sense in the context of these rumors for FBI agents to theoretically raid the workplace, right? And this is what I want to get into also. If those rumors are true, again, no idea. And it would be so devastating to be accused of these kinds of things if they weren't true. Just one of the worst things you could do is just absolutely insane to say about someone, right? So I don't want to go there. But in the context of those rumors, it is very possible that the FBI or some law enforcement agency or somebody with some level of authority asked the Chicago Bears if they could have some materials, and the Chicago Bears would comply, in which case it would make sense that a reporter might have misinterpreted that as a raid, and also make sense for the Chicago Bears to deny that their facility was raided, right? So these things are not necessarily off the table. And the problem is, all of this is happening while there's already extant chaos brewing in the building for other completely unrelated reasons. Just unrelated. Also, the statement, by the way, he never signed it. He just took a picture. It's all weird. It's so weird. And it's just on a regular piece of paper. It's not on any letterhead of any sort, which very often resignation letters will actually be in the company letterhead. Even though you're no longer with the company, just because it looks weird to just print off a normal Word document. So there's that also. And it just happened in the middle of the day. And it just happened because people kept asking, right? That's the thing, right?
They had their wild presser, and he refused to say whether or not that this guy was still a coach.
Yeah, just a couple hours prior to it was so weird. It's hey, is this guy still defensive coordinator?
You hold a presser to tell people, hey, our defensive coordinator decided week 3 is his limit, he's gone. You hold a presser for that. You don't hold you held it for everything else that day. You decided to leave that part out.
Yeah, so weird. Now, mind you, if he did resign for health reasons, or if he missed the Tampa Bay game for genuine health reasons, I don't want to say that that's not the case, right? Because I don't know. I have no idea. And I really hope, honestly, that everything turns out okay for this dude, because this is monstrous. Everything that's happening around it. It is something tragic is afoot, whether or not the rumors are true, partially true, some other awful accusation unrelated to those rumors, or none of them are true, and he's going through a health crisis. That's sad. So that is wild, right? All of that is wild. At the same time, Justin Fields is taking questions at a presser, and he is asked, hey, what's up? Why do you suck at football? Obviously not the specific question. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. What are your struggles? How do you fix, right? And he goes, coaching.
Yep.
Ah! That's nothing to do with Alan Williams either. That's just Luke Getsy stuff.
Yep. So why are you terrible this year? Oh, coaching.
Yeah, and it's like, and then a couple hours later, he holds another presser, which is just like, oh my God, damage control presser. We are in the twilight zone of this sort. Like, this is crazy. And then that's when the general manager holds a presser, right? Like that's how like things just got bad fast. So he says coaching, and what he means by that, evidently, and this is what he says in the initial statement. This is not the walk back or damage control presser. He says that it makes it really difficult for him when he's given a ton of pieces of information at once to play naturally, to react. He's always focusing on a couple of pieces of information that are not like integrated into his process, so he doesn't get to play naturally. He plays a little bit robotically. Okay, so in theory, you could say he's hearing something in his headset like, watch out for that safety. And now it's in his head. And, he spits out the play, and it's difficult for him to spit out the play because he's thinking, watch out for that safety. And the play is like kind of long or whatever. Fine. He spits out the play. He takes the snap. And instead of trying to set the protection or trying to figure out kind of if the running back should stay in or out, or if he should audible or kill the play, he's looking at that safety to see if that safety is going to rotate up top or drop down, which he should be doing anyway. But now that's his focus. He takes the snap. The safety drops down, and he moves to his read automatically based off of that. But it turns out the safety dropped down because it's an invert coverage or something. And so actually it is still, in fact, cover 3. It's just not the cover 3 that you thought. And now you're throwing a pick, right? It could, like, that could be it. So he holds a presser later, and he's like, no, what I meant to say is basically kind of what he actually had already said without the word coaching. And he's just like, yeah, I just got to focus on, finding ways to play a little bit less robotically. Now, I know that is that's a thing that he has mentioned before as an issue of his. So like, this is kind of like part of the whole thing. And then the general manager, Ryan Poles, holds a presser saying nobody is panicking. And then a bunch of people ask questions, and he basically says, what are you doing? Why are you asking me questions? All I'm doing is holding a presser. Why would you ask me questions? But, no one thinks of Justin Fields as a finger pointer in this building. No one in this building is panicking.
No one.
We are not panicking.
No one.
And Alan Williams just had to resign. And then they ask Tyreek Williams, quarterback for the Bears, hey, so this Alan Williams thing, what did Eberflus tell you about this? And he goes, oh, actually, the head coach has not talked to us at all about, we're just focused on next week. And it's like, you're focused on next week without your game planner through whom you focus, right? like how are you focused on, like, what are you doing to focus on next week without a defensive coordinator, right? He hasn't addressed the team about like the second most powerful person in your life just leaving. Like, that's crazy. Why wouldn't he do that? And like he could just address it like the exact same way. Like, he could just say, unfortunately, the personal issues that Alan Williams was dealing with last week that didn't allow him to join us at Tampa Bay, they have not been resolved. In order for him to focus on his health and his family, we're going to, let him take some time away from the team until such issues are resolved. And then from there, we'll have a discussion or something, right? Like, say the same thing you said to the media, right? Basically. But to the play, and that didn't happen. Oh my God. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers released some of their biked up film, right? Where Devin White and DJ Moore are talking, and obviously, they played in the NFC South together. And so Devin White has hit DJ Moore a substantial number of times. So that's how they're friends. So they're talking like before the game. And he's like, man, I wish you were here or whatever. We could use you. And says something like, man, they're using you all wrong. And he says, and this part is a little bit muffled because someone else is talking over the mic too. And he says, man, you're telling me, right? And it's like, oh God, oh my God, holy crap. It couldn't get any worse. Like, the head coach is being super weird and kind of unprofessional, not to the media, but to his own players, right? The offensive coordinator has been thrown under the bus twice by players. One, like super unintentionally. Like I feel kind of bad that like the Bucs just put out this video mic'd up that like throws the Bears offensive coordinator under the bus. Like that was just, it was not meant to be public. And I don't know if DJ Moore knew that Devin White was mic'd up. So that is weird, right? Like that's unethical, honestly. Like that's crazy. But two, also by Justin Fields, who later walked it back and said that's not what he meant. But like now it's in everyone's heads, right?
And later hugged his coach in a weird thing on Bears social media.
Which is more alarm. That's a vote of no confidence, or that's a vote of confidence, right?
Yeah.
That's like it's not
Week
good.
3 vote of confidence. Things are going poorly out there. Boy, I'd feel bad for the whole Chicago situation if I hadn't bet that was the first coach to be fired this year.
Yeah, and what's crazy is like 2 days ago, everyone was like, it was Brandon. 2 days ago, everyone was like, it's Brandon Staley's going to be fired first.
Nope.
And now it's just like, is the Chicago Bears coaching staff gonna? I think their special teams who's their special teams coordinator? Because I know the Chargers special teams coordinator is Ryan Ficken, which is really cool, right? It's the former Vikings assistant. Richard Hightower. Okay, I have no idea who this is. That dude is your next head coach of the Chicago Bears.
Sorry, the next interim
head coach, yeah. And based off of what I know of interim coaches, especially if they're special teams coordinator, probably not a long-term head coach, just because this whole process is unfair. But yeah, Richard Hightower, second year as a special teams coordinator, previously served as the club's assistant special teams coach in 2016. He has 16 years of NFL coaching experience, including with the Texans, Commanders, Browns, 49ers, and now the Bears. So, yeah, that's the guy.
Yeah.
That's because the rest of that staff might be gone.
Yep. It's very possible. I loved how like high everyone was on them like the preseason and before. It's like I was just watching that going, there's no way. He is still the first coach to go. Like you can't tell me otherwise. I'm really looking forward to that. So the question was from Draw Play Dave, what would be the funniest thing the Bears could be covering up right now? That the Bears owner was the one who was paying out the bounties in 2009 to the Saints in order to knock out Favre to keep the Vikings from winning a Super Bowl.
Oh, that would be good. I was thinking that like they were covering up a cryptocurrency scam.
Yeah, they're actually they are responsible for all NFTs being zero.
Yeah, I think what the report was released today that like, hey, a study finds that NFTs are worthless now, and everyone was like, study? What?
Actually, last time I was in Vegas, we were walking from this club to get something to eat, and we walked by. I swear to God, it said like NFT gallery.
What?
It was an actual like NFT gallery as you were walking by. So of course I took a couple pictures of the inside of it because as we were walking by, because as one does. But yeah, it was like I walked by it and went, "This is remarkable." While we're still talking about the Bears for a moment, is it possible Dan Snyder took all the attention of being a bad owner?
Yeah. So I got a question from somebody, either it was for the podcast or for something else, where they asked like, "Hey, is it the case that like Dan Snyder was like essentially like a lightning rod in the most metaphorical sense, that it drew all the attention away from other owners, or did the other owners get like worse? Are teams just like this?" And the answer is teams are like this, and Dan Snyder was very convenient for the rest of the NFL owners to draw attention away, because not a ton of people talked about how Robert Kraft got away with the massage thing, which in more explicit terms involves potentially, I want to be very careful with my words here, involves potentially the massage studio being involved in human trafficking of some sort, which is not to say that Robert Kraft is, right? He was a customer, but being a customer of a massage parlor involved in human trafficking could invite other charges unrelated to human trafficking, but are nevertheless illegal. But that case was dropped because of the fact that the police acquired evidence in a manner that Robert Kraft's lawyers had successfully convinced someone was unconstitutional or illegal. I am not a lawyer, and so my opinion that is a little bit sketchy, doesn't hold any water. So I'll say that. But it drew attention away from that. It drew attention away from Jerry Jones doing everything. And speaking of Jerry Jones, got named in the Jim Trotter lawsuit as somebody who was crazy racist, wrote about that over at Wide Left Post. And also Terry Pagula, owner of the Bills, also said some super racist stuff. That's also in the piece over at Wide Left. So that is all that. Jim Irsay and his struggles like over the years. And, you know, it's kind of weird that was happening and like no one really discussed it all that much. Owners are like, it's not a good pool to draw from. Billionaires are just not a great pool to draw from. Now, obviously, the ownership group conducts, due diligence, and part of that due diligence is on the character of the owners coming into the league. So I would be remiss to say that NFL owners are not a good group of people. I can't say that. They do character checks. All I can say is that the group of people that NFL owners tend to draw from are not a group of people that I think act very ethically at all. I don't want to commit the ecological fallacy, right? I don't want to say because a population has a tendency that a subgroup of a non-randomly selected version of that population also has that tendency. I would never suggest that the NFL ownership class in general acts unethically because billionaires tend to, in general, act unethically. That would be unfair. Yeah. There's a selection process. But so I wouldn't say that.
At the same time, Jimmy Haslam has done some crazy illegal things that have gotten him into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and I believe that they've been ruled actually illegal. Like he actually just did an illegal thing, right? So I can just say that with the rebate scam. And if not, my bad, check it out. Google Jimmy Haslam rebates. And that's the truth, right? Whatever a reputable summary of the events provides you is more likely to be true than whatever I say. But my understanding is, yeah, he did something just super illegal and screwed a bunch of truckers. So, that's on the table too. Anything the McNairs have said, the owners of the Texans have said about the protests or Obama winning the election, that's all public record. Check that out if you're inclined. Hey, there's a lawsuit against Michael Bidwell, or not a lawsuit, an arbitration filed against Michael Bidwell, owner of the Arizona Cardinals, where he is alleged to have done some sexist, racist stuff. That's all out there. You can just find that. Who's to say what that means about NFL ownership in general? I don't know.
Well, it means something is interesting going on in Chicago, and can't wait to find out more as the as things begin to unfold out there. Let's go to our next question and ask. Let's go to Ben, who says, "What do you think the primary motivation behind signing Cam Akers was? Because his current Madden rating, do you believe that the current Madden rating being 5 points higher than Madison's was the real reason why he was signed?"
100%.
Yeah.
That's got to be it. I mean, his Madden rating is higher, better guy, got to get him.
Yep, that's why you have young people on your squad on your coaching squad. Let's go to El Presidente, who asks, for a Reef's agricultural corner, by adding Akers, does gross production increase, or will the big oxen up front not be able to pull their weight regardless of the addition, making no positive improvement on the overall crop output?
The first two times I read this question, I didn't understand it, and then James said it aloud, and I was like, oh, it's a pun on Akers. Cool. Yeah. So it obviously depends on whether or not whatever equipment you have. I guess this would be capital in the sense, like tractors or oxen. Who's farming with oxen nowadays? But sure. Whether or not they have the capacity to do additional work, and if they don't, then your marginal yield will decrease. Maybe your overall yield will decrease. But if they do, that increases so long as the acreage is comparably fertile to the land you already own. That should improve your overall profit margin so long as you have enough time and capital resource allocation and so on. Is there a reason the word oxen was capitalized too? Am I missing a second pun?
I don't believe so, but I could be mistaken. But
maybe there's like a bell cow thing. I don't know.
Well, Let's go to Roro, who asks, what are the chances the Vikings could scoop up Justin Fields, having punted on him in the draft?
That would be very funny. Probably zero, but like, go for it. I don't know, man. Like, the fan base is already upset when you make minor moves. You might as well make a weird minor move.
Yeah, the fan base isn't going to what's what I'm looking for, bully you into getting Justin Fields. However, it would be funny if he became a Viking and became good. Facebook trained historian asks, is it too soon to call the 2022 draft a failure?
Okay, first of all, Facebook trained historian is like a great name. Second, probably it's probably too soon. The thing is, I think it is very likely the case that Lewis Cine's a bust, that Andrew Booth is a bust, that Ed Ingram is a bust. And then from there, I don't think we know. But if your first three picks are busts, it's very difficult to say that the draft was a success. But if a Caleb Evans turns into a good corner, which is like well within the realm of possibility, that's fine. If Brian Asamoah turns into a pretty good linebacker, you're in a good spot. So, Ty Chandler turns into a reasonable running back, which you should usually know by now. It's probably too soon. That's like my instinct, but it's like very difficult for me to envision that draft being like good. Hey, Ryan Wright was an undrafted free agent from that class, so
there is that. Let's go to Cody, who asks, Harrison Smith's name has rarely been mentioned over the first two games. Is he playing well, or is he beginning to fade into the background?
Most of the time, when that happens with a guy that you are very confident is very good, it's especially at safety, it's probably the case that he's playing pretty well. But I wanted to pay a little bit of attention to him when I did some game review stuff, and I don't think that he is playing necessarily poorly, but certainly I think that he is actually beginning to fade into the background, and I think his speed has dropped off somewhat, actually a fair amount, not even somewhat, and it is impacting his capability to play. I think that he's probably best suited for in the box play, which is kind of counterintuitive because the closer you are to the ball, the faster things happen, but he doesn't have to have range. And I'm sure his reaction time is still fairly good, although that does get impacted by age as well. And so that wouldn't be the issue. I think that his strength is still there, and I'm sure he's still a very capable blitzer, but it doesn't seem like he can do the stuff that he did before. And so I think that we are beginning to see him fade into the background.
Next question is going to be from Ziggy Dilf, who asks, how many fumbles per game would the Vikings need to give away to break the all-time record? Feels like the record, it feels like this is the year they'd have the best shot at breaking the record.
So the Vikings are currently on track for 51 fumbles, which means they're also on track for having lost 51 fumbles. 51 total fumbles would shockingly not break the record for most fumbles in a season, which was 56 by the 1978 San Francisco 49ers. They only lost 27 of them, so they actually don't have the record for most lost fumbles. They just have the record for the most total fumbles. The most lost fumbles belongs to the 1959 Chicago Cardinals, which, by the way, that means that record belongs to the Arizona Cardinals because that's the same team. They had 36 lost fumbles, which is crazy because they had 49, I believe, total fumbles, which is nuts to have lost 36 of them. So of teams since the merger, right, that's the 1970, so that was well before the merger, so that's kind of weird. Of teams since the merger, the 1978 Cleveland Browns lost 29 fumbles on 50 total, right? So they recovered 42% of their own fumbles. So the Vikings need to lose 23 fumbles in the next 15 games, or 1.5 per game. That's pretty doable. So, all things are possible with the power of Ben DiNucci, right? So to tie Cleveland, or to really break the mold and tie the Chicago Cardinals or beat the Chicago Cardinals, you would need 2 per game to tie the Chicago Cardinals. And I think the Vikings, if they put their minds to it, could lose 2 fumbles per game and beat the record for most lost fumbles in a season. That might mean, though, fumbling 4 times per game just to be safe, right? In order to fumble 2 a game, you need to, and that's above their current fumble rate, which is 3 a game. Now, if they just want the total fumbles record, they have to increase their fumble rate. They're not fumbling enough. They need 3.3 per game to grab the total fumbles record from the 1978 San Francisco 49ers, which I do find it interesting that these fumble records both come from 1978, which is also the year that a number of rule changes were made to the NFL to promote passing around the league. I assume a lot of these fumbles came from receivers. That's just, I'm going to assume that because it meant more passing.
I like how, you're looking at the, their current rate being at between 2 and 3 a game. They're going to have to bump it up to 4. Those are rookie numbers.
It's rookie numbers. Yeah.
Joe Glissick asks, for Arif's double negative corner, if both of these teams are super cursed, meaning the Vikings and the Chargers, is it possible that this could be one of the most flawless games of the year, or will the cursedness be doubled and we're in for a real treat?
I think both are on the table. And I think that it's kind of one of those things that's like a bimodal distribution, right? Like where these two outcomes are very likely, and then there's a bunch of outcomes in between or on the margins that are possible but are unlikely. And I think this is one of those situations where you could just have a flawless game. No one's making mistakes. Everyone's playing their best. You end up with like just this incredible 34-33 close game that's basically no one makes mistakes, but some throws are unguardable, and sometimes you just call the right play, and you get just this incredible shootout back and forth. If that happens, the Chargers win. That's my opinion. If everyone plays perfectly, the Chargers win. That just feels right. But I think we should not discount the double curse possibility, right? A bunch of fumbles, bunch of drops leading to interceptions, bunch of weird penalties. Like it would not shock me if we heard a penalty that had not been called in like 15 years, right? Like a double pass penalty or something.
Could we get a giving them the business on Sunday?
Oh, this would be a perfect giving them the business game.
Yes.
Yeah. So we could do that. We could see a fair catch kick, right? Like we haven't seen that in 20 odd years, right? Which for people unfamiliar, you can, instead of electing to run a play from scrimmage after a fair catch, choose to kick it. That's pretty rare because, you don't usually kick from, say, your own 20 where the ball might be punted to or kicked off to. That's, you don't really, no kicker has that kind of leg, so that's not happening. It's like a 98-yard field goal. But it can happen. And a short punt from, your own one, where the punter is backed up against the end zone. And so they don't have the same punting mechanics that they're used to having. They punt it short and the ball falls at about the 50 and you call for a fair catch. You can just choose to kick it. And the cool thing about the fair catch kick is that they're not allowed to block it. So you actually get to have a lower trajectory, which means more distance. So we could see rules invoked that we just have never heard of before. And that I think would be both. It would be the combination of cursed and flawless. That would be like really perfect in a really stupid way, which feels very Vikings Chargers.
Yeah. Vikings Chargers games tend to be weird anyway. Example, the longest play in NFL history also happened the same game as Adrian Peterson breaking the rushing record.
Yeah, so, and the Vikings won a game where the quarterback only passed for 39 yards.
Yep. This is
yeah.
All things are the normal stuff goes out the window when these two teams play. So it should be another interesting one. Pessimistic Minnesota sports fan asks, for James's name pronunciation corner, oh joy, what is the full name of the Texans kicker? Well, is I say his Christian name is it's John. It's John Fairbairn. Now,
is that the full name?
He goes off of something slightly different, and there's not a chance in hell you will get me to attempt to pronounce that.
What if he becomes a patron?
No.
No.
It's funny. I will do an audio book where I read the worst romance novel ever written for the Patreon people, but I will not pronounce Kamai Fairbairn's friggin' name.
So his name means seeker of wisdom.
Yeah.
which is very cool. The meaning of your name is your life, he said in an interview. Hawaiians have a long ancestry. It's really meaningful for me to go by my Hawaiian name. So you calling him John, honestly, what are you doing? That's kind of offensive, James.
I am taking this cop-out straight to the next question. From Nude Egg, who asks, question for Arif's missing vehicles corner.
God.
Having recently had your car stolen by the police, do you have any advice for the Charleston area individual who is currently missing their vehicle, about $80 million F-35 aircraft? Should he or she call around to salvage yards?
Good news. I have my car back. It's out of the shop. I have it back. I had to pay like $500 to rent a car in the meantime, plus the $750 on top of it. Insurance is wonderful and not a scam, and everyone should love car insurance. But I've got my car back. Last I checked, and I got DoorDash pretty recently, so checked pretty recently. It's there and whole. All 4 windows there, windshield there. Whatever the back version of the windshield is, rear window, right? That's there. It drives all right. The steering wheel squeaks for some reason, but I'm not going to complain. They just replaced the steering column, so fine.
Yeah. Have you thought about putting that thing in a garage by chance?
Thought about it, James. Yeah, that's crossed my mind.
Have you thought about taking the money from the Wide Left Substack in order to build a garage?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I have. You're right. That has crossed my mind. The people in the Discord have been just so helpful, so remarkably helpful on this front. They have linked me to inflatable garages. Certainly that would stop a potential thief easily. How would you get past a balloon garage? I don't see how. And certainly I love the assumption that I just have extra space to put a garage on. That's a thing I have access to. So really appreciate that.
It would be a nice thing to do for the people who own the house that you're staying at.
Yeah. Just, hey, here's a garage.
Yeah.
Which I will use and not you.
Well, you have the more stealable car, so.
Yeah. It's, as we found out, their car is fine. It's been fine. Never been broken into. Or stolen by cops or anyone else, actually.
As it turns out.
The F-35, obviously, the person should call local salvage yards because it's the first place you should look. Call local tow facilities in case they've towed any fighter jets. Check local craters. If there's a crater with debris in it, take a look.
Maybe smoldering, maybe smoking.
Right. Certainly remains of some sort, quite possible. But yeah, who knows? Maybe I was treated to a wonderful, let's just call it a theory, maybe a hypothesis even, that the government stole it, which that did happen to me, but I think is unlikely in this particular situation because they already own it. And so stealing it would be unique.
Kind of a hat on a hat situation there.
Yeah. Yeah. But hey, you gotta hide your arsenal somehow. And that is one way to do it. Report it as having been destroyed in a crater when really you secretly flew it without a pilot to a black site facility or something. I don't know. I'm saying too much, James.
Well, let's go to our next question, which has nothing to do with government surveillance at all, or whether or not birds are real. We're going to go over to Basque, who asks, for Arif's Animal Exterminator Corner, have you ever had a animal take up residence in your ceiling or walls? I currently have a pair of squirrels that I've named Richard and Linda that are living in my ceiling, and they don't want to leave.
Can you tell Richard and Linda apart, or did you just determine that, there's 2 of them, so one of them's probably named Richard, one of them's probably named Linda, but when one of them moves and you can hear them, you're like, that's Linda. Linda's up to no good, and you can
Yeah,
tell the difference.
I mean, I'm reminded of the of the Mayhem commercial where he's the possum.
Yeah.
I've already had like 30 babies up here. We're just sitting and gnawing on the pink stuff up here.
Yeah. So I absolutely suggest that you call an animal exterminator, like some form of pest control, because I have had this happen, and the people I called were wonderful and professional and prompt. Although the next time I needed to call them for actually a completely different issue, um, there was a labor shortage among the pest exterminator community, so it was really difficult to schedule them. But they did get that resolved too. But the thing is, they not only figure out how to deal with whatever pests you have, which you can, like, depending on the agency, you can ask them not to kill and just trap and then free, right? That's a thing you can negotiate, or you can just be like, hey, do whatever you need to do as quickly as possible. What are those? But they'll not only do that, they'll inspect your house for any points of ingress and suggest or even offer repairs to that effect. And the one I talked to, and I wish I knew, because it wasn't like a big name company. It was like locally recommended to me. So I don't have this person, so I don't know who it is. But the one I talked to provided me with like a multi-year warranty on that specific problem, that if it appeared again, he would just take care of it, no questions asked. That's how confident he was in being able to resolve the way that they got into the building. So yeah, do it. Call someone. That is so much, like, because they'll chew on your stuff, right? And I don't mean like you've got a baseball card collection up there that they'll chew on, which, yeah, that maybe that too. But like the wiring, like stuff that you will have to pay a lot of money to fix. And also they poop up there. That's just a hazard. Just don't have that happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, call someone.
That doesn't go well. Don from Ohio asks, biggest issue for the Vikings being 0-2. Weak interior offensive line, which is causing the running game to be non-existent, woefully undersized defense, or the Vikings and Norse Code not signing Pit Boss Grills as a sponsor for the season. Nothing lifts spirits and morale like perfectly cooked ribs and burnt ends on a Pit Boss Grill. Delicious. Did I just do an ad read for Pit Boss Grills?
Yeah, you got tricked into doing an ad read.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Finally from Don, for James and Arif's marital anniversary gift ideas corner. The wife and I are celebrating our 2-year anniversary tomorrow. We are headed to Cleveland to see her favorite band play at the House of Blues, as well as staying at the Crown Plaza as well for 2 nights. I wanted to surprise her with a gift right before the concert, the free $25 slot voucher at Jack's Casino, or a free blueberry muffin coupon offered by the hotel. I can't decide. I'd prefer to keep the slot voucher for myself, but I don't want to come off as cheap. I feel like this is a good time to offer her the complimentary shampoo and conditioner. I feel like you could put that in a nice basket also in the room and give it to her.
Yeah,
maybe some nice free water.
Yeah, so that's
underrated gift. I think that's the 2-year anniversary gift, isn't it? It's
when you go to the list of like the traditional, like, 5 years is, I don't know actually what they are, but like I think every 5 years it's a medal of some sort, like steel, gold.
There's
silver,
like
platinum.
paper anniversaries and all that, and this is the
this is the water anniversary.
Yeah, this is the hotel water anniversary.
Yeah. So
maybe steal the coffee maker.
Oh, that's good. Well, confirm that it's a decent coffee maker, then steal it.
Confirm it's a decent coffee maker. Put on your Luke Braun, put on your Luke Braun mask, and bring it to the car.
Yeah, there you go. So I don't see a problem with that. So first of all, don't take anyone else who's not Don listening. Don't take advice from a podcast, especially a football podcast, about marriage. But second, my understanding is that the actual anniversary symbol for like the second year is like cotton, or like a bedding of some sort is like kind of the modern interpretation of it, like a new thing of bedding. There's like colors and stuff. That one's like less interesting to me, but like I guess it's red, which if you get bedding and your house is not set up from a decoration standpoint for red, don't get red bedding. Get bedding that you're like significant other would appreciate, right? Like it's like that. Everyone is part of the interior design planning process. Don't screw that up by getting the traditional color with the traditional thing. But that's my understanding. So yeah, don't do what Don does.
And really, that could apply to so many things, quite frankly.
It's a really great piece of advice in general.
Yeah. Well, that's gonna
ask yourself, what would Don do, and then do the opposite.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back next week to talk about what happened during the Chargers and Vikings game. And maybe there'll be more information as to what's going on in Chicago. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Ooh.
At this rate, they may have a new coach, and I can collect on a bet. So, Arif, what do you have to plug?
Yeah, so over at wildleftpost.substack.com, obviously I've got a recap of the previous game up. I've been a little bit slow in publishing. I wanted to write a Cam Akers piece, decided that was a little bit too boring, and so I stopped partway through, so sorry about that. But I'd just rather give you good content that I care about. But over there, you can find a piece where I compare Puka Nacua to Jeremy Lin. You can get my quick thoughts on Dalton Risner, which that one is a free piece. You can get a piece where I talk about the, whether or not they're the reverse 2022 Vikings. That's all up there. And then by the time many of you are listening to this, I'll have my Friday recap up, which has, all the work I've done and all the work I've read and have been interested in over the past week.
So that's it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Again, we'll be back next week. And if you join over on Patreon, the newest bonus episode was just posted yesterday. So check that out over at Norse Code's Patreon, patreon.com/NorseCode. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember to, maybe you should just put that in the garage next time. And we'll be back next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of Pro Football Network, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.